Good morning, colleagues. Jan, it's now 9 o'clock. Are we ready?
Chairperson, we are ready. You can proceed.
Okay, thank you so much. Good morning, colleagues, and the members of the AG's office, the members of the Provincial Treasury, the delegation of the department, members of the media, guests, and other interested parties that may have a particular interest in this particular meeting. Welcome to our meeting. I think it's a very important meeting, and I hope that we will robustly engage in the content that will be delivered today. But before we proceed, let me just remind members that before the rules of engagement or order of this particular meeting, but I just want to establish from the procedural officer if we are quorated before we could immediately commence. Johan?
That's correct, Chairperson. We may proceed. We've got a quorum.
Are there any apologies?
I have not received any apologies from any members. All our members are present at the meeting, plus a few extra. And then just one apology from Minister Bredel's office, as well as the HOD's office, Mr. Paulson, due to cabinet responsibilities, they will not be able to attend. Senior officials from the department are all present, though, to handle the presentations.
Thank you, Johan. The person that you heard now is the procedural officer, Mr. Johan Kutsi, of this committee. Thank you, Johan. For those of you who may not know me, I'm Derek America. Could the members just indicate their presence by acknowledging, or, please, can I just hear you speaking?
Good morning, Chair. This is Honourable van der Westhuizen.
Morning.
Good morning, Chair. This is Matlodi Maseko.
Thank you. Morning. Any other members?
Chair. Good morning, Chair. It's Member Makamba Boyka.
Good morning, member.
Good morning, Chair. Dalen Mitchell, alternate member to this committee.
Morning, colleague.
Morning, Chair. Danville Smith.
Good morning, Honourable Smith. Any other members present? Okay. So, members, thank you for indicating your presence. As we will proceed with the presentations, the various delegations will introduce their speakers at this particular meeting. So, may I remind colleagues and those present that this meeting is conducted via MS Teams, and the meeting proceedings are also being aired via live feed on YouTube, which any interested person or institution or stakeholders may tune in to follow our proceedings. Secondly, guests on MS Teams platform, except for those presenting at this particular meeting, are not allowed to interact, participate, verbally or otherwise, without being requested to do so by the chairperson. We have technical assistance in the form of IT staff present that is available to any member who may need such assistance during the course of the meeting. At the start of our meeting, all members will be muted to avoid any interfering background noises. Furthermore, if a member wishes to alert the chairperson and wish to make a comment or speak at any particular time during the course of the meeting, I'd request that the member use either the chat function on MS Teams, or there's a little open hand function, and you can simply just press that to alert the chairperson that you are of your desire to speak. I'd like to request all members to switch off the videos and audio when they're not speaking, because of the inclement weather that many of us experience. We wish to just enhance the quality of your connection and our ability to receive you as clearly as possible. If a member is speaking, he or she may put on his mic or video. It is, desirable, of course, if so that we could see who's speaking. If once you have finished speaking, I dutifully ask you to switch off your mic and your video connection. So remember, I'm not going to bore you with further, rules of order, but the same directives of meetings, of committees, by electronic means, it was ATC'd on the 17th of April would apply in order to maintain order at the meeting, and all other standing rules applicable to meetings will also apply. So lastly, colleagues, unfortunately, due to the limited capacity of our platform, we do not have interpreting services available at this stage, and I would like to appreciate members participating in the meeting to speak English as a means of communication as far as possible. In the event of a member not being able to express himself clearly and fully, we can consider alternate arrangement at that point in time. So the order of the meeting would be, we will have the presentation from the Attorney General's office. That will be led by its business executive, Ms. Adams, and Mr. Gavin van der Hoeven. And then thereafter, we will have a presentation by Provincial Treasury and the department. So that's the order in which we will take. The proceedings will follow. I would just like to state that it is not expected of the AG's office to be present when the department and Treasury present their response to the AG's report. So, but if they wish to stay, they may do so. So, the first order of business is that the AG's office will make a presentation. We will then provide an opportunity for members to seek questions of clarity, to interrogate the presentation and the report, and thereafter the other presentations would follow. So, colleagues, without much further ado, I am going to ask the AG's office to present and to introduce the team to us. Thank you. So, let's go.
Good morning, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members and officials and all protocol observed. So this morning with me, I've got Ntoshin Tsamela, which is our acting Deputy Business Executive, and Gavin van der Hoeven, that is our Stakeholder Liaison Manager. That's basically part of the meeting. Chairperson, Honourable Chairperson, just through yourself, would it be okay that only for the start, only I show my face, then I will just go off and basically be talking via audio? I think it will just make the quality of the presentation much better if we do it in that way.
No problem, Ms. Adams. But before we proceed, I see the hand of Ms. Jalinda Gatana. Ms. Gatana, you would like to raise something?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. I wanted to just add also the apology for Mr. Savage, as he's also engaged.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Thank you, Ms. Katana. Your audio is a bit low. Could you just up the volume at the time when you do the presentation, of course. Thank you. Right. So, anything else, Ms. Katana? Or okay. Lowered your hand. Thank you, Ms. Adams. You may switch off your video, and I think it is a means of enhancing the quality of the presentation. Thank you, and we may proceed, Ms. Adams.
Thank you so much, Chair. So we've got the presentation, the link to the presentation online. I hope all members can see it, but I know we've also emailed this presentation in advance. And I think what's important was probably, before I'm going to start with the presentation, the Auditor General about 2 weeks ago has basically published a general report, and I must say it's a very good document. So if any members wants to go back to refer back to the general report and specifically focus on to look at our own province and also the other provinces and how those outcomes is looking from a national perspective, that information is available in our general report. And I can request Gavin maybe just to send a link where members will be able then to access the detailed report. But because I must indicate, this detailed report has very good information in there that members, as part of their oversight roles and responsibilities that they do play, can basically utilize this information. So if I basically can just go over to the presentation. So as we've indicated, improved audit outcomes, but remains concern. And I think as I will be going through the presentation, I will be highlighting, yes, there's certain very good things that's happening in our province, in the Western Cape, in terms of the audit outcomes. And you will notice as I will be navigating the slides and taking you through the slide, there is also a lot of good stories to tell, but there's also some concerns that we thought it would just be important to highlight to the members. So if I can start with the first slide that basically deals with the audit outcomes, and what we've depicted there here is the audit outcomes over the last 3 years. And we've seen from 17-18 to 18-19, as per the slides, there has been an improvement in the audit outcomes from the 1 year to the next year. And I think specifically, if you just go back to the 16-17 financial year, we see there's a huge decline in the audit outcomes in 17-18, where in 2018-19 there has been a significant improvement in the audit outcomes. So in total, we found that about 13 municipalities obtained clean audit outcome. I think noteworthy to note, of that 13 municipalities that achieved clean audit outcome, there was about 8 of them that was able to sustain their audit outcomes from the prior year. And overall, I think if you look at these audit outcomes, I think that is also a step in the good direction, is that 93% of the auditees, 93%, received an unqualified audit report, meaning no qualification in terms of adverse or disclaimer of audit opinion. So that's 93% of the auditees receiving an unqualified audit report. If I can move over to the next slide. And what the next slide basically deals with is just the movements table, where we compare the prior year to the current year and what was the movements relating to the prior year to the current year. And if you notice how the columns is set up, we've got improved, we've got unchanged, we've got regressed, and then we've got outstanding audits. So underneath that specifically, we've got unqualified with no findings. So in terms of the ones that was clean, and we've got as in total indicating there was about 13 municipalities that received unqualified reports with no findings, and these are the total 13 municipalities in this specific block. What is important to note, as I've indicated previously, there's 5 basically of the municipalities that's improved from the prior year, where they received unqualified with findings and they basically went into clean audit outcomes. And those municipalities are listed: Drakensberg, Langeberg, Prince Albert, Sedan, and Theewaterskloof. And those municipalities that remain unchanged, meaning they were able to keep their clean audit outcomes, and some of them, I think, has kept the clean audit outcomes for more than 5 years, was Cape Winelands, West Coast, Berg River, Cape Agulhas, Cederberg, Hessequa, Overstrand, and Witzenberg. Then if we go to the next column, which is the unqualified with findings, and we've seen basically first as the improved column, where George and Oudtshoorn in the prior year were qualified with findings, where in the current year they were unqualified with findings. So those are the 2 improvements of the current year, and that is basically mainly because of the tone of leadership that was set in those municipalities to address the audit finding in the current year. Then in terms of the unchanged column, we've got a couple of municipalities, about 8 of them, that kept unqualified with findings. And then in the regress column, we've got about 4 municipalities that basically regressed from basically clean audit outcomes in the prior year to unqualified with findings. And I will go into much more detail of what these findings that led to these municipalities regressing in the current financial year. Then we've got, in that same line, we've got Kannaland that indicated they were outstanding at that point in time, where we were looking at the final result for publishing, which was by the end of January. And for Kannaland specifically, this report has been subsequently finalized, and they did obtain an unqualified audit report with findings, both on compliance and on predetermined objectives. So just to indicate that to the members. And then our 2 auditees basically that received qualified audit reports was Beaufort West and Laingsburg. And mostly in the issue on asset management, the qualifications was in terms of existence of assets that couldn't be confirmed, and also in Laingsburg case, in the case of inventory management, where there was specifically challenges in terms of inventory management. And so they had quite a number of items that was qualified for the current year, and also had findings on non-compliance to laws and regulations and predetermined objective. Now, the next picture that I will be talking to, and I think it's a nice depiction in terms of from a district perspective, how the outcomes is looking. And I think clearly from looking at this specific picture from a district perspective, it indicates which are the districts that needs a bit of attention. Overall, when we've actually looked at our message for the general report for the current year, and we've looked at our auditees, and so when we look at these auditees, there were 3 categories that we've looked at that we actually categorize our auditees. So the first category is that we've looked at is that with the control environment, that there's control environment that is institutionalized at their specific municipality. So there's preventative controls in place and strong tone at the top of leadership. There's a low appetite by management for any audit findings that's normally raised, and a high level of accountability. So when we do raise any audit findings, when you go back the next year, you find immediate action is taken and implemented. Also, the assurance providers, which is internal audit and audit committee and the council, they play quite an important role in this environment. So that was the first one, where the control environment, where it's institutionalized at the auditee. So it wouldn't matter who is in what position because things are functioning appropriately. The second category of municipalities that we've looked at, and so those municipalities would be more the ones that's ultimately unqualified with no findings, which is clean. Second one that we've looked at is the municipalities that's reactive or susceptible to change. So it's either municipalities that has been clean, they go to unqualified with findings and come back to clean and vice versa. So in this cases, what we've looked at is that the control environment is not always institutionalized, and it's more reactive nature than a proactive nature to address controls in the control environment. We do find that the audit outcomes move from clean to financially unqualified with findings. And in some instances, there's also a lot of political instability that actually contributes sometimes to the instability at the municipalities itself. And as a result of that, a lot of times it's very difficult when the municipality has moved from unqualified with no findings to unqualified with findings. It's difficult then to come back to unqualified with no findings. Then the last category of municipalities, and these are mostly the municipalities that's basically in the yellow zone, as we've got on the specific slide. The last category of municipalities that we've looked at is the municipalities that is compounded by dysfunctional control environment and can be attributed to weak tone and attitude of leadership. And this is mainly what we do experience in this type of environment, is that there's lack of visibility of leadership and also accepting the poor audit outcomes over the number of years. So what you do see year on year when you go in there, you get similar findings. There's no improvement of the findings at the end of the day. And basically, if you look at our general report, how we termed it, and I'm going to use a bit of Afrikaans word here now, it's basically where we say that maak nie saak attitude. So what we find there year on year, we get the same thing. There's no real improvement in the control environment. And I think what we do find, the same attitude from a management's perspective is then cascaded to the staff. And those are mostly our auditees that's basically in the qualified zone that we did experience this type of dysfunctional control environment. So looking at our auditees in terms of the Western Cape, we've got where the control environment is good, it's institutionalized, there's preventative controls in place. Then we get to the category where there is some challenges with, in some cases with the control environment, is more reactive nature than a proactive nature. And then lastly, what I've touched on is just from a dysfunctional municipalities perspective. I think overall, if we look at the audit outcomes for this province, and I think if we look specifically in the Central Karoo district and also the Garden Route, most probably, that is sometimes where some of these challenges are basically being found from previous years. But we have seen in the Garden Route for the current year, there has been some improvement in terms of addressing some of the concerns that has been raised in the previous year. And I think in the Central Karoo district areas, it's mostly Beaufort, West and Laingsburg, where these challenges are being experienced. If I can move on to the next slide. So the next slide basically deals with the local government and basically the financial sustainability within the local government sphere. So what this basically slide just depicted, we basically taken the information from the income statement and balance sheet and basically look at specific ratios at the specific municipality. So overall, if we look from a revenue generation perspective, total revenue, and there we've excluded the equitable shares, about 50.8 billion for the province as a whole. And then from an equitable share, we've also just indicated what that number is from a provincial perspective and also the conditional grants. I think important to note, linked to that is revenue, then the expenditure, which is basically salary costs of about 18.9 million for the province. And then also in terms of the average creditors payment ratio was about 54% overall when we've looked at the province, I think, in terms of the turnaround time in which creditors are paid. I think of concerning, and later on I will touch a bit on the irregular expenditure and the increase of the irregular expenditure and the reasons for that. So I'll talk a bit more about that. So it's 2.6 billion of irregular expenditure. The unauthorized expenditure sitting at about 400 million for the year under review. And specifically looking at the unauthorized expenditure, this mainly deals with non-cash items, like, for example, when there's, for example, changes in terms of the depreciation calculation, the useful life of the property, plant and equipment, also the post-retirement benefits sometimes that that would result in that. The provision for doubtful debts, where on a yearly basis you have to look and say, looking at my current outstanding debtors, the people that basically owe me, the consumers, how much of this will I not be able to collect? And that results in some, what we call the non-cash flow items that ultimately then result in the increase in the unauthorized expenditure. Then we're indicating also the year in some municipalities that has a deficit, and I'll touch just a bit on that in the next slide. So overall, I think what we've also seen in terms of the challenge we do find in terms of the collection rate of debtors. So on average, about 51% of debtors is not recoverable. So basically 50% of your debtors that is billed is not recoverable, which I think that is quite a concerning one specifically. And taking the economic climate that we are going through, there is a couple of challenges relating to that. So if I can go over to the next slide, and this is basically depicted per district in terms of the district. And where the municipalities are in terms of financial health. And you would notice for overall for the Western Cape, majority of our municipalities are basically in the green zone, meaning in terms of a good financial health perspective. So from a income and expenditure perspective, no major deficits that they've got in terms of the municipality. But I think now with COVID-19 and what has occurred and what has transpired, this picture might look totally different in the next year, because there is a lot of challenges as a result of COVID-19 that is currently experienced on the municipal side in terms of able to collect debtors. But maybe just to indicate, in the Central Karoo district, we've got municipalities basically in the red zone, where we basically indicate intervention is required. And those is mainly Beaufort West and Laingsburg. And mainly because both of them basically in terms of their ratios, they've got some deficit. And also if you look overall in terms of their debtors collection days, takes about 678 days, which is quite a number of days. And then also the creditors payment days is over 100 days. And hence that is one of the key reasons that why they're sitting in the red zone. The other municipalities in the yellow zone, basically, if I can maybe just focus on the West Coast District Municipality. So it's basically Berg River, Cedarburg, and Matsikama. And that is because when we basically look at factors specifically in terms of collection and mainly because of the number of days of collection is one of the great concerns that they're sitting in the yellow zone. And in the Cape Winelands area, it's basically Drakensberg Municipality that was sitting in the yellow zone. And then in the Garden Route, it was Hessequa and Knysna specifically that was sitting in the yellow zone. So I thought it was just important from a financial health perspective to just raise where the concerns are. So currently for the Western Cape, there's 2 municipalities really that we are concerned about in terms from a financial health perspective. Further on, if I can go over to the next slide. So this specific slide speaks about preventative controls. And I think the importance of preventative controls, because as we know, if something can be prevented instead of being reactive rather than proactive, it has huge implication even from a cost saving perspective, because if a control is not prevented and something is picked up reactively, so what that normally does is that in those cases where it's reactive, then a lot of times the money's already been lost, investigations needs to be done. And as a result, we do find a lot of times when investigations are done, this takes quite a long process and it's a lot of time very costly in a cumbersome process. So I think the key thing that we're advocating to say, when it comes to the various processes within any institution, whether supply chain management, contract management, when you do your payments, your payroll processes, your assets and liability management and revenue management, make sure that there is the appropriate preventative controls in place. And I think what we've realized that from a leadership perspective and the assurance providers, they play quite an important part in making sure that this is basically driven within the institutions at the end of the day. And there we're just depicting at the bottom of the slide the costly, if there's consequence that happens, it's a lot of time, financial loss that already had occurred, costly investigation, disciplinary action that takes long time, and in some cases it can lead to litigation. So the next slide that I'm going to deal with, the next two slides basically that deals with the irregular expenditure, I would want to spend some time on. And we've noticed that there is a huge increase in terms of the irregular expenditure compared to the prior year to the current year. And the main reason for this increase overall, and when we go to the next slide, it will also talk about what was the type of non-compliance finding that has been raised. And I think mostly has to do with what we would term in terms of competitive bidding processes not followed. So if we look at the specific movement in terms of the irregular expenditure for the 89 year, so in total, the 1.3 billion for the current year that was identified for the current year, some of it represents non-compliance, and some of it represents ongoing contract that is ongoing. And then payments or expenses in the previous year only uncovered in the current year. So this could be contracts on prior years that was only uncovered in the current year, and that is basically what would make up part of the irregular expenditure that has been identified. Some of that irregular expenditure that comes to the 2.69 billion relates also to identified in the prior years, that is cumulative amounts then for the current year. I think to note in terms of the areas where some of these irregular expenditure was identified. So City of Cape Town, there is one where the largest one is identified. And mainly because of extension of contracts and how extension of contracts has been dealt with in the City of Cape Town in terms of the process that's followed. So that resulted in quite a bit of the irregular expenditure. So basically when the contract is expired, before the contract is supposed to expire, a process needs to be followed in terms of a competitive bidding process. So that didn't normally unfold and resulted in contract extension that didn't follow appropriate processes. Then George Municipality, it's a finding that also relates back to the prior year that was identified, and specifically relating to where councillors was involved in some of the procurement processes, in terms of some committees that has been set up as part of the procurement process. So that resulted quite in a bit of the irregular expenditure. And in terms of Oudtshoorn was the other one, and that's specifically related to Regulation 32 in terms of the process followed when there is piggyback contracts and how that process was followed. And that resulted in that irregular expenditure for Oudtshoorn for the year under review. If I can go over to the next slide, basically, and this slide basically depicts in terms of from a supply chain management perspective and where the specific findings was in this area. So I think one of the things that I wanted to highlight, if we look overall for the municipalities as a whole, everybody had findings on supply chain management. Some cases, yes, only in the management report, and it wasn't material to report in the audit report. And I think that is one of the key ones that I just wanted to highlight. If we look overall at the findings in terms of supply chain management, so majority of those findings relate to uncompetitive or unfair procurement processes being followed by municipalities. So cases, for example, where a deviation was approved, but in terms of the motivation given, it didn't meet the criteria. So in cases where something was supposed to go out on tender and it didn't go out on tender, or something where quotes were supposed to be obtained and no quotes was obtained. So those are the cases where it led to that. And then we also had instances where in terms of regulation for 44 of the MFMA, you're not allowed to, SEM regulations, you're not allowed to contract with state officials. So that's prohibited in that case. So these are the cases where we've identified that it was contracted with state official. In some cases, I must indicate false declaration has been made, and the municipalities doesn't necessarily have the tools to basically pick this information up. So false declaration by suppliers, there's 32 suppliers that has made false declarations. So in these cases, we have communicated it to the municipalities then to take the appropriate action from that perspective. I think the good thing for us in terms of limitations, so for the year under review for the auditors, we didn't have any limitations in terms of not getting information or documents. So documentation was supplied to us. So non-compliance with Regulation 32, so 76% of those, so quite a number of municipalities had that, and mainly because of also clarity that's further given in terms of a court judgment. 3 quotations not obtained, so that was in 24% of the cases. Competitive bidding not invited, 41% of the cases. And declaration of interest not submitted by suppliers, 38% of the cases. And performance of contractors not monitored on a monthly basis. So in that case, 28% of the cases we've reported this finding. And I think the biggest reason why we're highlighting this area of supply chain management, because this is an area where it can be vulnerable to fraud. And secondly, to make sure that when you've procured goods and services, that you do get value for money for the goods and services that you are procuring. So I think some of the preventative controls that we've seen at other institutions, they've got a clear annual procurement plan that would depict what are the procurement that they would do, and they would know that in advance. Safeguards, again, conflict of interest, so appropriate action is taken, and then also making sure that the procurement processes are standardized, very important. So if I can move over off the area of supply chain management, and I think that specific area resulted in some of the regressions that we did experience in the current year for those municipalities that's moved from unqualified with no findings to unqualified with findings. The next item I want to deal with is just very briefly on the quality of the performance information, because when we basically, one of the things we also given a conclusion on performance information, where we basically look at 2 areas, is looking at the usefulness of the information and the reliability of the information that is presented for auditing purpose. So from the municipality's perspective, they've got a IDP basically where they've got their 5-year strategic plan. Based on their IDP, they do their service budget delivery implementation plan, and that basically is their performance plan that they have to deliver on a yearly basis. So for the municipalities under review, noting this information, the quality of submitted information, so 38% basically submitted information where there wasn't challenges with the quality of information. So the rest, basically, there was challenges in terms of the quality of the information. And then secondly, after we've audited and things was corrected, then 79% of the municipality didn't have findings then on the area of predetermined objective. So if we look at those that where the findings remained in the audit report is under the usefulness of the targets, where the targets was not in terms of the SMART principle. So it was difficult to audit it from that perspective. So those ones that has findings in that area was Central Karoo District, Beaufort West, Knysna, and Oudtshoorn. So under the reliability of information, this is again where the evidence wasn't forthcoming to support the performance indicator. So those were Garden Route District, Beaufort West, Knysna, Laingsburg, and Oudtshoorn. And yeah, I think on a year-to-year basis, we don't see a huge improvement here. And a lot of the key root cause of this concern from a predetermined objective perspective is that from a municipality perspective, most of them have a decentralized process. So each line department will be responsible to collate the information. This is then communicated centrally either to a monitoring and evaluation unit within the municipality. But what we do find a lot of times, the timing when those things are communicated back and appropriate checks and balances are not put in place, then to make sure whatever the line department is supplying, can that information be verified with sufficient evidence? And I think that is one of the key root causes that we do find with the municipalities, and also in terms of appropriate record keeping that is not done on a consistent basis. The next slide basically deals with the preventative controls, and here we would notice in terms of the insurance providers, which we believe plays a very important role in terms of the control environment and functioning of the control environment of the municipalities. So you would notice specifically overall when we look at the insurance providers for senior managers, sitting in the yellow zone 65% and red zone 21%. And that is, and the same with the municipal managers, and mainly because of us still getting a number of findings on procurement and contract management, compliance to laws and regulations, and also in the area of predetermined objectives. So basically, I think the key point that we're making in terms of those assurance providers, because they've got quite an important role to play, is and sometimes there is repeat findings that is being communicated, and then appropriate actions are not then taken to basically deal with some of these findings. When we look in terms of the assurance providers from an internal audit and also the audit committee oversight perspective, in some cases, very good and very functioning. And the reason why some of them were basically in yellow is in terms of their specific mandate, not fulfilling their roles and responsibilities. For example, from a performance information perspective, there's clear guidelines in the MFMA. This must be reviewed by the internal audit. So those are some cases where we didn't find that they did in terms of their roles and responsibility. The last one in terms of the oversight, and this basically deals with the municipal council and also the impacts. And in majority of the cases, we did find a functioning impact that looks at the audit findings and basically look how people can be held accountable. But we've also just experienced some challenges, and that relates to some in the yellow and in the red zone for the year under review. The next slide basically deals with the so basically that is the audit outcomes for the year under review. And the next few slides basically deals with the PAA implementation. Now, I know in the past we have presented this information to the committee specifically relating to the PAA implementation. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on it, because in terms of the definition, it's something that we did bring to the committee and spoken about that. But what I thought it'd be important just to note in terms of our phasing approach, again for the 1920 year, that so in prior years, City of Cape Town was phased in as one of the municipalities, metros, where we looked at MIs, but none has been identified at the City of Cape Town. And for current year, City of Cape Town will be included for phase-in approach, and then the municipality listed below: Beaufort, Cedarburg, Drakensberg, Garden Route District Municipality, George, and Stellenbosch Municipality. If I can maybe go over then to the PAA implementation slide. So I'm not going to go through it in detail, but what I thought it'd be important just to come and give feedback to the committee as promised based on my last engagement, that based on the implementation, the phasing implementation now during last year, the PFMA cycle, there has been specific material irregularities been identified. So I thought it'd be important for me just to share this with the committee to see what are those things, not specifically in the Western Cape, but in other provinces and nationally, led to specific material irregularity. So it basically just gives you an indication and a picture of that. And I think in terms of the extended power, it's something I think I've spoken about before, and also just clarified in terms of what's the difference between when we do a regularity auditing, looking at the opinion on the financial statements, conclusion on compliance, and a conclusion on predetermined objective. And compared to investigation, where investigation is something much more intense, that you would basically go much deeper and dig much deeper into that specific issue that you are concerned about. So that is one of the things that I wanted to raise in terms of the definition of material irregularity. And I think this is something, if I can go over to the next slide, Kevin, thank you. This is something that I've spoken about previously in terms of what this definition means and how it will unfold. I think what's important to note in terms of the definition, when we started out last year with our phasing approach, so we specifically look at non-compliance or contravention of legislation. And then based on this definition, we then went further only to look at anything that during the audit, identified during the audit under this act that result in or likely to result in material loss. So looking at this definition, that is basically last year where we basically stopped. Where for this year specifically, looking at this definition for the phasing approach, we will look at non-compliance or contravention of legislation, fraud, theft or breach of fiduciary duty identified during the audit performed under this act that's resulted or likely to result in material loss. So for this year, what we will add, we will also look specifically overall in terms of fraud and theft or breach of fiduciary duties. So from that perspective, it is extended from that perspective. I think the last time when I was here, I did speak about the various processes in terms of what are the key changes in the amendment. So the first one, that the AGSA is able to refer any material irregularity to further investigation to any public body. So that is one that is a key change. The second one is taking binding remedial action. So this is basically from an audit process perspective, we normally give audit findings and recommendations. So it's up to management to implement it. But when it comes to material irregularity that has been raised, those recommendations must be implemented, because if it's not implemented, the next steps can follow in terms of the accounting officer being held liable. Lastly is the issue of certificate of debt. So the Auditor General has the power to issue a certificate of debt in the name of the accounting officer. Of course, having to go through various processes, as I've explained the chain previously, that will then only result if proper processes are not followed by the accounting officer. If I can go over to the next slide, that basically deals with the type of material irregularities that has been identified in terms of those auditors that has been phased in for the 18-19 financial year. And of the 12 completed audits, we have identified 28 material irregularities that basically results in a 2.8 billion financial loss. So known loss is about 2.5 billion and estimates is about 300 million. So I think what's important in terms of, because based on the legislation, the accounting officer basically needs to then basically take the appropriate action when the material irregularity is identified. So in 89% of the cases, the accounting officer is busy taking the appropriate action. So of course, now that we're busy with our PFMA audits, we're following up those actions that they were supposed to take. Are they taking the action? In 2 cases, basically, there was recommendations included in the audit report to say what the action needs to be taken. And in 1 case, it was basically refer to a public body for further consideration. Now, if you look at the nature of the material irregularities that was identified, so mostly uncompetitive bidding processes not follow overpricing of goods and services based on a specific contract. So in these cases, we've got 438 million. Then also unfair procurement process being followed, suppliers being appointed that did not deliver. So in those cases, there's an amount there. And then also in cases where payments for goods and services not received. So this is a case where literally somebody was supposed to deliver some goods and it wasn't delivered at all, but the money was still paid to those suppliers. And then payment for poor quality of work. And I think previously, if I link this specifically to a finding that we've also raised overall, looking from a performance management perspective, where contractors are not being performance management and held accountable. So in this case, they continue paying although the work was of poor quality, and invoices or claims not paid on time. So this results specifically in where invoices are not paid on time, interest accumulated at the end of the day, and that resulted in that specific material irregularities. If I can go over then to the next slide, basically, And I'm just going to highlight a few because a majority of these cases that I've highlighted and mentioned before is things that the accounting officers are looking at addressing, and as part of our audit process is something that we will be following up, as I've indicated, as part of this specific audit cycle. So indicating in terms of various overpayments and duplicate payments to contracted for housing projects, resulting in a 32.9 million loss. So this was a case basically where a contractor, for example, was responsible to build houses. They were paid for those houses and repaid again for the same houses. So those are the cases where duplication of payments basically happened. The other one relating just to retention of fees. And this is a case basically where, as part of contract management, there's a specific portion of the money that's held back as retention fees, either 10% or whatever's stipulated in the contract. In this case, what was stipulated in the contract, more has been paid back in terms of retention money. And in this case, also in terms, this matter is with the accounting officer for further investigation. The next one is an interesting one. This is where the contractor was basically appointed to do specific work. So from the contractor's perspective, they were ready to do the work. However, they couldn't continue the work because there was some disagreements that basically happened between the entity and the national department, and the contractor basically being there ready to do the work because they were appropriately appointed. And that resulted in a specific loss. Then where consultant was appointed for financial management service, but no evidence is basically shown for the work that they've actually done. So that is in that case. And then payment for mammogram services, even though the hospital did not render the service and they did not have the mammogram machine. So it was something paid for goods and never delivered, but the payment was then done. What I can indicate in terms of this specific example, so this is just some examples that I'm sharing with you, but these audit reports is also electronically available if we can actually provide that to members, specifically those specific audit reports where these things were mentioned, because these reports has been tabled at Parliament and at the various legislatures. If you want to see specifically how this is depicted in the audit report as part of the findings that is being raised. So the last slide basically talks about the phase-in criteria. If we can move over to the next slide, and I've already spoken about that. For the current year, again, we are looking at phase-in auditees. For the MFM A cycle, I've indicated and listed those auditees where it will be phased in for the current number of years. And I think the main focus was more to say, when we look at the total budget, what is which entities, departments has the biggest budget? And then secondly, also the quantum of irregular expenditure overall within every national department in provinces and municipalities. So those were some of the things that we've looked at when we've looked at the phase-in approach. Honourable Chairperson, that is basically the presentation from my side in terms of the audit outcomes of local government for 18-19 year, and also just feedback on the phase-in of the material irregularity. So I'm open for any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Ms. Adams. I think it's a lot to be digested, but fortunately, members received these reports beforehand. The floor is open, our colleagues, for your engagement. Indicate your willingness to speak. I recognize the speakers in the following order. We have Honourable Maseko, Honourable Mitchell, and we have Honourable van der Westhuizen, Honourable Smith, and there are three more others. But let's start with Honourable beg your pardon, Honourable Maseko first, and then Honourable Mitchell, Honourable van der Westhuizen, Honourable Smith, and then we will take the next round of speakers after the responses. Thank you, Honourable Maseko. The floor is yours. You may speak?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And I want to thank the AG with the detailed report for this financial year. We really appreciate that. If I can start by requesting that, yes, if we can get the report of the material irregularities to those municipalities, we will definitely appreciate to know which municipalities are involved in those irregularities that are happening there. And as for my question, the first one, it will be on the asset management. I think it's the second page of the movement table of the presentation. On the qualified with findings of Beaufort and Laingsburg, and the presenter indicated that the asset management inventory and the non-compliance of the predetermined objectives. And I know that when we had a conversation with the AG the last financial year, this was also one of the concerns in different municipalities. And we talked about how do you empower municipalities, or how do you advise the municipalities in making sure, because the basic of asset management, municipalities have to know exactly what do they have. Now, if it's something that is not a moving target like the asset management, how do you empower municipalities and that doesn't have capacity, or that have capacity but they're not interested in making sure that they give the records of what do they have? Is there a way in the AG that you go to train them on knowing how to do asset management, how to do the inventory management? And if that is the case, was Beaufort West or Laingsburg, did you go and try to empower them with that information for this year's financial year's audit outcomes? And the other one is, you mentioned the political instability in municipalities also is a contributing factor. Maybe if you can expatiate a little bit so that we can have understanding. If you say political instability in municipalities also contributing the audit outcomes, the example of what is it that you mean for this financial year to come with that conclusion? Thank you, Chair. For now, is just only those two questions.
Thank you, Honourable Secker. I recognize Honourable Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me first state that I welcome the presentation and thank you to the presenter for the presentation. Chair, I want to my question relates to the Beaufort West municipality with regards to the audit findings, and I've got a couple of questions, and it's not. It hasn't been presented as part of the presentation, but it links to what has been said. So if you will indulge me, and if I'm out of line or out of order, to please tell me so, and then I will use a different platform to raise those questions. But under the asset management, Honourable Maseko has partly touched on it. I know that when it comes to asset management, in particular in Beaufort West municipality, this has been an audit finding by the Auditor General for the past 2 years, or might even be longer. So with regards to asset management, what processes has the Auditor General now put in place to ensure that in fact gets remedied? Because I think Ms. Adams made a statement which or nicely put, where it's that ons gee nie om attitude nie, because we will just continue at the trend that we are going, because the bottom line is nothing happens, or there's no accountability at the end. With regards to the the financial health status of Beaufort West municipality, which has also been highlighted as part of the 2 municipalities, which I'm extremely disheartened by, because ultimately the citizens or the residents of Beaufort West would suffer under that kind of mismanagement or financial mismanagement. What is the remedies that have been put in place to ensure that this gets remedied as soon as possible? With regards to the deviations, there's a numerous amounts of deviations that happened, in particular in Beaufort West municipality. What is the link between the Auditor General, the provincial government, in particular the local government, the Department of Local Government, and the municipality to address or get to the bottom of these deviations? My last question, with regards to the engagements with the various internal audit committees, I'm speaking under correction, but I think that there was only one engagement with internal audit at Beaufort West. Is that the norm for the AG to only engage once, in particular in light of the severity of a municipality like Beaufort West municipality that's completely under the spotlight when it comes to the audit findings? And then, Chair, if you just one last question, with regards to or actually let me leave that for the second round. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Honourable Mitchell. Honourable van der Westhuizen, I recognise you.
Thank you, Chair. Chief, and thank you very much to the representatives of the Auditor General for the presentation. I must say it is, in a sense, shocking to see that the best performing province in terms of audit outcomes is still showing such a lot of room for improvement after so many years of us having to deal with the MFMA, and one would have thought that many more municipalities and senior managers would by now have been able to grasp the requirements of the MFMA and that it would have looked a lot better. There are a few things which were highlighted and that I find a little bit disturbing. The first one is, if I copied it correctly, the payment period for creditors on average is 54 days. Now, the Chair, I do know that we are also trying to build capacity amongst smaller enterprises. One of our aims is to try and broaden the economic base by supporting inter alia smaller enterprises, but many of them just can't survive for 54 days. If they've rendered a service, they had to pay salaries, they had to buy stuff, and they are only paid for their services after 54 days. So perhaps if we could just get a comparative figure for previous years, is this a figure that is improving despite still being a little bit disconcerting, or is there some regression in this regard? Then secondly, Chair, I think the whole issue of debt collection, if we could get a little bit more information on that, because I think this year will be a particularly difficult one, with many cashiers being affected by the lockdown. Many municipalities received very, very little money during the just past financial year. And if debt collection has already been a problem before, I think it must only have worsened considerably over the last 3 months. Chair, then I want to highlight, as the AG has highlighted, the role of management. Now, my impression is that many of these senior managers, most of them, if not all, are appointed on 5-year term contracts. And after 3 years have gone, people start looking around for another 5-year contract because there's a lot of risk involved for senior managers in the public sphere, and particularly in municipalities. And we are already, it seems also from the audit outcomes, struggling to attract people with the right competencies, particularly to our smaller and more rural municipalities. So I'm just wondering, has the turnover of senior staff also been identified by the Office of the Auditor General as a possible contributing factor to the fact that many of these people cannot be held liable? Because by the time that the audit has been finished, etc., many of them have moved on to a different municipality, and therefore it's very difficult for even those in the political. It's very difficult for councils and for mayors, executive mayors, to hold people to account if there's such a high turnover. And then, Chair, lastly, am I correct? There were 20 municipalities countrywide with so-called clean audits, unqualified with no findings, and of those 20, 13 were in the Western Cape. So. Is that the picture that the Western Cape is really so much better despite all the shortcomings that we've just learned of? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. I recognise Honourable Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask the AG. There's a term that is called com-ups or com-fs, and I think this is the audit, the raw auditing before the final outcome and final findings is produced by the AG in the municipality. This com-ups is the process where raw findings is being found, and the municipality gets an opportunity to correct some of those things or to give an explanation and blah blah. I'm not sure if this is exactly called the management report as well, if it's one thing. But my question is there a possibility for the AG to perhaps avail such reports called or the com-ups of a particular municipality to the public, and so that one can monitor on a year-to-year basis what those com-ups are, if it's the same on a yearly basis, and what improvements the municipality did on those management report or com-ups, as they have called it. Then, Chair, I just wanted to understand is it safe to say that the AG can be persuaded in a municipality when it comes to a particular finding or audit outcome? Say, for instance, and I'm making an example, there has been irregular expenditure for 2 consecutive financial years, and the AG is happy with that. The municipality or the municipal manager or the CFO convinces the AG the irregular expenditure occurred because of this and this and this. They couldn't advertise the tender and blah, blah, blah. I'm aware of 1 or 2 municipalities that did that, where deviations is happening on a monthly basis for a service that was supposed to be rendered out and went out to tender, and competitive process was supposed to be done by the municipality, and it did not happen for 2 years, almost 2 years. And in those municipalities, there was a clean audit. So I don't understand the rationale behind that approach. Then lastly, Chair, slide 9, under findings, I just wanted to understand the percentage. Is it the percentage of municipalities? Because the presenter was making reference to the percentage of cases. Now, is it cases of all municipalities and there's this percentage, or is it the percentage of municipalities that the AG is referring to? Thanks.
Thank you, Honourable Smith. And the other honourable members, could I ask you, those who have raised their hands, just to lower it again, so that if you wish to follow up on the reply, then I would know if you want to do so by raising your hand again. Thank you. I leave it over to.
Chair.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm not sure if I don't have a facility to raise a hand. It could be noted for a comment on this.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take your question now, Honourable Makamba Boita, and then Ms. Adams can respond to all the questions in the first round, and then we will have a second round thereafter. So, Ms. Honourable Makamba Boita, you may raise your questions.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the presentation by the Audit General Department. For the year under the review, Western Cape Province has incurred irregular expenditure of totaling of 2.7 billion. Can we then be provided with a breakdown in terms of which municipalities are most impacted by this irregular expenditure? In fact, the presenter has made mention of Beaufort West and Laingsburg as one of the municipalities with challenges of this nature. And just a comment on the entire report, specifically with municipalities with unqualified audits. In reality, there is no direct relation between a clean audit and what is really out there. There are so many deviations and monies that have been diverted from certain projects and diverted somewhere else. And these deviations, in a nutshell, are having a very direct negative impact on the lives of the poor communities who solely rely on municipalities for service delivery. A lot has been highlighted by the presenter on the causes of poor performance in these municipalities with findings. What I want to understand or want to know is, are there reports where municipalities, councils have conducted investigations into all instances of unauthorized, irregular and fruitless wasteful expenditure? Whose head is going to roll for the failure of servicing the people? And I also want to know, in the office of the minister, if there are any cases that have been dealt with. Are there any reports? And if you dig deep into these irregular expenditure reports, it clearly suggests that leaders are looking after their own interests and not those of communities. For an example, there are so many projects that are long outstanding and long overdue that were aimed at benefiting poor communities. For an example, I can make examples of Metro. For an example, we have R4888 housing projects in Guguletu, Mau housing projects in Nyanga. Those projects are long outstanding, but we get clean audits in these particular municipalities. For an example, the issue of Naisna in Hyder Valley housing projects that meant to cater 2,000 people, and no one can account what happened to the 7 million paid to ABSA for their study of environment affairs. And then coming to Drakenstein, there's housing projects that are long outstanding, Flackland housing project, Simodium housing project. What happened to those monies? They are being diverted for clean audits. Matsikama, for an example, we've got an outstanding RDP housing project at Mangaung Civil since 2012 in Vredendal. This continues maladministration, where one company in Matsikama get awarded with tenders year after year called PR Service. So we want to understand what is the role of the Auditor General in these instances. For an example, in Stellenbosch, the Western Cape government made a funding for Ida's Valley housing project for 50 million, which was given to buy the funds from the late Mr. Smith of these funds, they were valued at 5 million. Why was this over evaluation and funding by the Western Cape government? The list is endless, but these projects are not given any priority it deserves. Why? Because monies are being diverted somewhere else to cover up corrupt activities and loans in order to claim clean audits. In conclusion, Chair, we require decisive political leadership that looks after the interests of the poor communities, those who are previously disadvantaged, who do not benefit from the economy of South Africa, and not only focus on business communities. It's actually a trend in the Western Cape to claim clean audits, of which it doesn't speak to what is happening in reality. We have so many challenges out there. People are not getting services, but we always claim clean audits in the Western Cape. So I want to understand what is the role of the AG, and are there any investigations that are taking place in these municipalities who are not performing, especially the issue of Beaufort West and Lane Strike? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Kamba Boita. Okay, now we have exhausted the first round. I hand over to Ms. Adams, who will attempt to respond to the questions raised by the members. Yeah, Ms. Adams, over to you.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. So thank you for all honourable members for the questions. So I'll respond to the questions that has been raised. So the first one, in terms of requesting the information relating to the material irregularity, we'll make sure that we provide that information then to the members so that they can have sight of the information. Then relating to the whole issue that was raised, I think with the issue with the qualification areas that was raised, specifically for those auditees that has been qualified. And I think overall looking at, and the question I think the member specifically asked, what does the AG do about it? You've raised these findings, so what? The things from our side that we basically do, so we've got a status of record review for in the case of both Beaufort West and Laingsburg, where we went in and based on the findings that was identified in the previous years to say what processes management then put in place to rectify it. I think what is important from an audit perspective is that we normally then raise those issues, then it's management's prerogative then to implement those recommendations that we've raised. So importantly, I think in terms from an oversight perspective, local government and provincial treasury also then plays an important role in providing specific guidance to the municipality. So in this specific case, for Beaufort West specifically, it related to when we were looking specifically at the assets, we couldn't clearly get confirmation that the information as recorded in the financial statements is complete, that all the assets has been appropriately recorded and then verified. So that was a key challenge that we had in terms of one of the qualification area, and it's specifically related to infrastructure and how this information is disclosed. So if I can maybe make an example. So for example, for roads infrastructure, that normally is then disclosed together in terms of the various roads that you've got on your asset register. Then there would also be infrastructure, for example, for dams and water and so on, that would be together. So specifically when we were looking and trying to verify the assets, there wasn't a clear distinction which infrastructure belonged where. So it's a process from the municipality side that they're still busy going through in terms of the unbundling of the assets. So that unbundling process has not been completed yet for the year under review. And I know that they are looking to basically address that issue. So that was one of the key reasons, because that unbundling process didn't occur. The assets then that was disclosed wasn't then appropriately disclosed, and we couldn't verify the information when we needed to confirm that those values has been improperly disclosed. From a predetermined objective also, so in their case also they had a qualification on the irregular expenditure, on the completeness of irregular expenditure. And I think the key challenge that literally we had there, it was just in terms of record keeping and information not being available readily, that it did cause a lot of effort for us to then get to this conclusion. So that was the second qualification area. In the area, I think on predetermined objectives, also some challenges found. And if you look at the audit report also, there's a myriad of non-compliance findings that has been raised specifically in the audit report in terms of a number of areas of non-compliance that basically requires attention for the year under review. So those are just some of the challenges, I think, from that perspective that we have found in terms of the Beaufort West municipality. I think in terms from a training perspective, because that is what the honourable member raised specifically, is to say, I think that needs to, from a provincial and specific, most probably local government, in terms of the support providing to the municipality, in terms of the assistant. What I also know, they do also have consultants that does some of the work, and I think important in terms of the oversight then over the consultants that also does the work. So when you get back the next year, then you don't then face with similar findings that you've raised in previous years. So from our perspective, what we normally do, we've got a status of record review where we give this early warning signal to the municipalities. But if they don't implement the recommendations, there's nothing from our auditing perspective that we can do about those things that is not implemented. And then you come back the next year, then you find exactly the same finding basically reoccurred for the current year, and there has been really no movements in terms of the audit outcomes relating to that. The next question that was raised in terms of the political instability, in terms of how it can impact the audit outcome, and I think the key reason that we're raising there, or the concern that we're raising there, and we did find that in terms of changes that happens within council, and I think that changes that then happens, then sometimes new appointees are made, and ultimately then that has an impact in terms of roles and responsibilities having to be performed from that perspective. So I think the concern was just in terms of the instability, when every time those changes occur, sometimes that changes also happen from an administrative leadership that actually also causes the instability, because it's ultimately the administration that's responsible for the functioning of the municipality from that perspective. So if changes in political part also then has impact on the changes from an administrative leadership, and I think that is more or less that where we raise concerns relating to that. Specifically relating to the area of asset management, again, the area of Beaufort West. So as I've indicated, it mostly had to do with the unbundling of the asset, and that process that's not completed at this point in time, that we did then have challenges when we had to confirm the amounts that was disclosed in the financial statements. Then the other one was just relating to the financial health and what remedies need to put in place. And I think here also from a provincial treasury perspective, I know with a lot of municipalities, a program was run, and all of them actually in terms of revenue enhancement, and what processes can be put in place for revenue enhancement. So I think it's basically to continue on that trend to see what are those processes could be put in place to improve the service, to improve the financial health of a specific municipality. So I think from a provincial treasury perspective and local government, there's a lot of work, I think, from that perspective that they have done relating to that. Then the other one, just the link of the deviations, and to address the deviations. And I think what's important to note specifically when it comes to deviations, and it's basically allowed in terms of the section, in terms of the regulation of the supply chain management, that you are allowed to deviate in the specific reasons given why you actually allowed to deviate. So from our side, what we basically do, and to note that we don't normally do 100% of testing. So we do test on a sample basis and based on our risk identified. And in those cases, we normally report those findings in cases where the deviation doesn't comply with Regulation 36, in terms that it's not emergency in that case. And in those cases, then we would report those deviations and also result in irregular expenditure. And hence, we've also seen then the increase of irregular expenditure compared to the current and prior year. What would also be if the general report link is shared actually with the members in there, it's actually very nicely where we've got quite detailed per municipality and how much irregular expenditure, unauthorized expenditure, fruitless and wasteful expenditure per municipality. And it has the detail that would also be useful for the members to look at. Then the other one was just on internal audit engagement. In terms of our engagement, so from our side, yes, in terms of our status of record review, when we normally have these engagements with the municipalities, we normally do that. From an internal audit perspective, they've got specific roles and responsibility. I think that they've got to play from their side. So as far as possible, where we can, we do provide support and share information with each other from that perspective. But I think ultimately, when it comes to the role that internal audit plays, administratively, normally they do report to the municipal manager and also to the audit committee. So from accountability perspective, it's that the municipal manager and the audit committee that needs to have a clear oversight on the roles and functions then on internal audit. The next item that was raised just in terms of the payments, average payments days of compared to prior years. So I don't have that information with me, but I can come back, Honourable Chair, through you to the member to indicate if there has been an improvement in the number of days. I think what's important to note when we specifically look at this ratio from a ratio perspective is looking at the information at year end. So to take all the municipalities into account, and normally as part of the management report, we would report for each specific municipality what has been their payment ratio. So this could include some municipalities that takes quite long, in some municipalities where the turnaround is very quick in terms of paying the creditors. But we will be able to share that information that with the member. Then in terms of the debt collection days, and I think this, as the honourable member has indicated, is I think it's a very concerning trend in terms of the number of days. And I think in this case, we have seen in terms of an increase compared to the prior year. And I think taking into account where we're moving in terms of COVID-19, even more concerning than relating to the collectability of the outstanding debts that will be a huge challenge. The honourable member also raised a concern that a lot in some cases that we do find that, as the honourable member mentioned, that as the audit processes unfold, some officials leave and they leave the institution, and hence the accountability is a challenge in some cases, and who will be held liable relating to some of these matters. And I think what's important to note in terms of, and I think that is one of the key things what we're advocating in terms from having the preventive controls in place and having institutionalized control environment, which basically has a huge impact. So whoever who's in the roles and responsibility, it wouldn't then have an impact if the control environment is institutionalized at the end of the day. And I think when we look specifically in terms of the extended powers of the AGSA from a material irregularity perspective, is to say, is those officials who was there needs then to be held accountable and action needs to be taken, because I think when the accountability part doesn't happen, then everything just continues on the same trend at the end of the day. So yes, from an auditing perspective, yes, there is sometimes challenges when there is movement, but normally whoever is the accounting officer at that point in time is then accountable then to provide the information. The next item was just in terms of the confirmation. Yes, in terms of the confirmation from a Western Cape perspective, 13 out of the 20 that is in the Western Cape, so it's 100% correct. And I think later on I will just talk a bit about what the clean audit outcomes means, and just to provide a bit of clarity on that when I will just move to answer some of the questions later on. Then the next one was just in terms of the process of communication of audit findings raised and ultimately management's report. And I think as part of the audit process, normally we would issue a communication of audit finding when something is not resolved, either in terms of the request for information or we've picked up an audit finding. Management has a period of days then to respond to that. If that matters then not resolved, it would go what we call in the draft management report. And if some of those items then would stay there, or it will based on our assessment in terms from materiality perspective would either go into the audit report. So in terms of the process, normally in terms of sharing management report, because this is normally a management tool that is intended for the purpose for management to take corrective action, and hence it's called the management report. But in cases where anybody wants access to this report, normally from a municipality side, we would normally request them to write to us via the speaker. And based on the consideration, we would basically consider them to issue this information. But as I indicate, normally the audit report is the one that's for public consumption, where the findings that has an impact on the audit report is there. But if access is required to the management report, we would normally require to, via the Speaker's office, that request would then come to us, and then we will make an assessment if we need to then issue that management report. I know in some cases, some municipalities actually tables their management report to their councils. Then, in terms of AG being persuaded, an honourable member just raised when it comes to deviations and year on year. And I think what's important to note here, when it comes specifically to deviations, we would normally assess in terms of the criteria. From our case, normally when we do this assessment, we would base it on sample basis, and we would make that assessment based on the motivation that management is given. Based on that, look at the criteria. What I can indicate also from our side, what we do, and because this is one of the key risks that we've identified. So it's a key focus area that we do focus on this area from a risk perspective. And we've got regular engagement in technical meetings where we discuss it, where we look normally per municipality and we assess this information. And based on that, we would basically then come to the conclusion, was it appropriately applied or not? So I would request the member maybe later on, if there's specific concern with specific municipalities, that you provide that information to us, and then we can then further just assess it and look then from our side based on the concern that you raised. But we do basically robustly really interrogate and look quite in substantive detail when a deviation has been selected for audit purposes, that we do make sure that we do that evaluation appropriately. So in terms of the next question relating to slide 9, in terms of is it the number of instances or the number of municipalities? So in those specific case, in slide 9, it would be the number of municipalities specifically. In some cases overall, that would basically have that specific finding that would be reported then in the report. So that would be the number of municipalities, and that's how that percentages has been made up in slide 9. So irregular expenditure, the total amount of the 2.69 billion. So what we can do, as indicated in the general report, there is that detail, but what we will do, as in the past also, we can provide those details to the members to indicate exactly which municipality it related to and what the quantum was per municipality. So I'm more than willing to then share that information with the members relating to that. Then I think overall the next concern was raised in terms of the unqualified audit opinion, clean audit opinions, the impact of clean audit opinions. So I think it would be important for me just to spend some time just very, very briefly relating to a clean audit report. So a clean audit report is an unqualified audit report with no findings on compliance to laws and regulations and on predetermined objectives. So I think key for us when we then look at this information, it's not specifically that we focus on, yes, that service delivery take place. So the member's 100% right. In some cases, we do find, although somebody has an unqualified report or a clean report, it's not always the case that we see the evidence on the ground from a service delivery perspective. So just from our side to clarify that we specifically then look at giving an opinion on the financial statements. That's the first part. So what's presented, can we give an appropriate opinion? Secondly, can we conclude on compliance based on any material finding? And thirdly, on predetermined objective. And I think specifically when we look at predetermined objective, our key focus would be those things in terms of indicators that the municipality indicated that they will drive. And we would audit that. So we would normally not give them an opinion to say these things you were supposed to include. And I think as part of oversight, and even from a council perspective, when those reports goes to the council for considerations, those IDPs and SDBIP, that is an opportunity for that council to give the input to make sure that the right things are being measured and monitored at the end of the day. So we don't find ourselves in position that the things that matters is then not included in the things in the predetermined objective. And I think here also the key focus that we would overall just look at is in terms of the mandate, and based on the mandate are those key indicators then included. But I know local government also plays quite a significant role in looking specifically at the predetermined objectives of the municipalities, and also providing some training and education relating to that specific area. So the other one is just in terms of the investigations, and is investigations done on unauthorized irregular expenditure and fruitless and wasteful expenditure. So in cases where we've, and this is one of the things normally that we look at in terms of consequence management, and did consequence management occur based on the findings that we've raised previously. So in instances where the consequence management did not occur, or the investigation is not done appropriately, then we would normally also raise a finding relating to that. Based on this information, this should normally be available from a council perspective in terms of, because these reports needs to go to council. So it's part of the public documents that when the investigation has been done, and it's normally either the impacts that does this investigation and basically have to do report back to council to say, based on what we've investigated, this is basically the conclusion that we came to, and it's normally presented from that perspective. Then also some concerns that was raised by the member, and I think specifically relating to specific projects and the traction relating to specific projects being not completed, and then money being provided. But what we do find in a lot of cases, projects are not completed. And I think specifically, if I reflect back now on the prior year and specific focus on the procurement and contract management, a number of these irregular expenditure specifically also related to the housing projects, where we've identified, for example, certain suppliers basically has been appointed for quite a long time and didn't follow proper procurement process. So in those cases, there's a couple of municipalities that we've reported actually, and they've disclosed the irregular expenditure relating to this specific area. So I think it was probably in those cases where the municipality from specific projects where there's concerns that's being raised for those projects, and it's not receiving traction, because I know they also need to then report in terms of the progress of their specific projects and what has been done to date and why is there delays. And I think it would be important that if this is a huge concern for this committee, which I believe it is, then to get written responses in from the municipalities to explain what is the reasons for this and what are they doing about it, then to basically make sure that some of these areas are improved and traction is being basically obtained from a project perspective, and the delays in project. From our side, when we would normally select a project, so these findings normally, if a specific project has been selected and we would do work on it, looking at the value for money spent, looking at how long it takes to complete the project, we would normally then report some of those items only in the management report for the year under review. Honourable Chair, through you, I hope I've covered all of the comments and the questions that was raised in the first round.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Adams. It's not up to me to determine whether you've answered the questions adequately to the satisfaction of the members, but I'll open the floor for a second round and final round of questions. As I've indicated earlier, that I'm going to restrict members to one important question that they wish to ask, and one question for clarity. And I'd like to urge members just limit yourself to a very long preamble to your question, please. For sake of time, we're going to run out over time if we don't limit ourselves. Thank you, Ms. Adams, and thank you, members. I recognize Honourable Maseko in this order, Honourable Smith, Honourable Mitchell, and Honourable van der Westhuizen. Thank you, Honourable Maseko.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I think I will send the questions directly to the procedural officer because we still have to engage with another 2 presentations and the time is not on our side. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you for the consideration. Thank you, Honourable Maseko. Honourable Smith.
Honourable Chair, let me follow the same approach. Yeah? So I'm fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Mitchell. Agbare Mitchell, kan jy my hoor? Can you hear me, Honourable Mitchell? Okay.
My apologies, Chair. I'm sorry,
Sure.
I'm struggling with my connectivity. Okay. Chair, I will also put, because I've got lots of other questions, I will put it in writing. I just want to no, it's fine. It's let me rather just put it, because then I'm going to open it up for a response. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Mitchell. Honourable van der Westhuizen.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. Chair, for effective remedial action, I think it's important that, these results should be shared with municipalities as quickly as possible. I do know that, it's only the report to us that it's come more than 12 months after year end. But my question is just how can we speed up the feedback to municipalities in order for management to act on the audit results more swiftly and more effectively? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. Honourable Makamba Boycha, you have a follow-up question?
Chair, I'll follow the same approach of sending my questions directly to the procedural officer. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Adams, it seems to me there's only one question that you need to respond to.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Chair.
So it's in terms of my... Okay.
Chair.
Yeah, can you just identify yourself, please?
Maran.
Welcome, Honourable Maran. Gosh, I thought that you was not part of the meeting. Thank you. You may speak.
I'm here for the last 30 minutes, Chair, and it's actually disappointed that you have not noticed that I'm part of the meeting.
Sorry, I received a message that you tendered your apology due to connectivity problem or load shedding in your area. So I took it that you're not part of the meeting. My apology.
Yes, Chair, but you should have noticed that I have joined the meeting. But as it is, Chair, I want to second the proposal by the Honourable van der Westhuizen that municipalities this information should be forwarded to them as soon as possible. Also for one simple reason, Chair. Municipal managers will bring, for instance, an item to council when there was, for instance, a deviation. And in that item, Chair, all the information will not be there. They will not know the reasons why there was a deviation. All the information will not be there, and council will approve the deviation that took place. Just to find out when the AG comes and there's audits, there will be specific reasons, for instance, this one and that one and that one and those, and therefore it will be deemed as irregular expenditure. So, Chair, I also got a lot of questions. I will follow suit by forward those questions to the procedural officer, but I will agree with the Honourable van der Westhuizen that this information should be sent to municipalities as soon as possible so that they can see for themselves the reasons actually why there was irregular expenditure. Because if you look, Chair, compare last year, 17-18, compared to this year, it's 2 billion rand more. 2 billion. It was 0.68. It's 680,000 a million, if I'm not mistaken. And now it's 2.68. It's exactly 2 billion rand more on irregular expenditure. So, Chair, yeah, I think the information should be forwarded as soon as possible to municipalities. Thanks.
Thank you, Honourable Maran. Thank you, Ms. Adams. It's just one question of you need to respond to. Please proceed.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. So what I can indicate from our side, normally the process that we do follow in terms of the management report and the audit report, we normally also, as part of our steering committee meeting, the mayor sometimes is part of that, where those findings is also then communicated and shared. Normally in January, we also attend council meetings where we are invited to council meetings and also share these audit outcomes at the council meetings. And I've also recently, I think, at the Speakers Forum, also then presented the audit outcomes, but we will make sure we take note of the concern that was raised by the member and make sure we will continue on our drive to make sure that the messaging is clearly heard by everybody within the municipal sphere. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. It is now 11:15. Let me just conclude. I think that we can spend another 2 hours interrogating this particular report, and I'd like to thank yourself, Ms. Adams, and your team, and the many auditors that worked on this particular audit within the province for the excellent work that you guys are doing. And I think, just to sum up, I think that we can celebrate 13 out of the most clean audits in the country, the most unqualified audits. I think there are notable achievements that we have in the province. But I think that's just concerning the ballooning of the irregular expenditure. And I think in your presentation, not once was it alluded that much of this irregular expenditure related to local content that were not adhered to. And I think that some of the examples that you mentioned about this irregular expenditure, it is really, really frightening. And I think that we, as an oversight structure, we will fail in our duty if we do not go deeper into this. And I think one of the first things that the Honourable Maseko was saying at the beginning, that you will, to our procedural officer, make available the audit report that details the irregular expenditure and unauthorized expenditure in the various municipalities. And we, as an oversight body, we need to hold those municipalities accountable. And we cannot, in this province, in this time, at this crucial moment in terms of service delivery, have such a huge amount of that is deemed to be irregular. And we need to get to the bottom of it, and we need to make sure that we address it as soon as possible. And we cannot year in and year out, you raised that this almost R500 million rand of irregular expenditure. It was not known before, that came to the fore during this, but the last audit. We need to get to the bottom of these sort of things that, and we need to address it as an oversight body and make sure that whoever is to be held responsible for it are being held, and that consequence management is being sort of applied as harshly and as urgently as possible. So if it means that we need to call those municipalities to this portfolio committee to account for these irregular expenditure, we need to do that. But we can only do so if we have that report, and I would like to urge your office and Mr. Kutsi to get that report as quickly as possible so that we could go deeper into this and address this matter as urgently as possible. Because in this province, we cannot allow this to happen. We need to stamp it out. We need to give our people value for their money, and that the services are being rendered, that we commit ourselves to rendering those services. And whoever is not party to that need to be held accountable, and we as an oversight body cannot allow that to happen. And wherever there is fraud and corruption and malfeasance, those responsible will have to take the rap for that. But conclusion, thank you, Ms. Adams. You play a very important role, and we are grateful that you alert us to these shortcomings that still exist in the province, and then we as the responsible oversight structure need to work with our municipalities, work with the department, work with Provincial Treasury to address whatever shortcomings may exist. Thank you so much. I'm going to, just let us have a short breather of 5 minutes quickly, and then we will immediately thereafter at 10 to 11 have Treasury's response in terms of how they could assist in addressing the shortcomings highlighted by your office as a result of the past year's audit outcomes. And then you may leave the meeting if you wish to, or you may stay as being part of the meeting, and then we hope to finish this meeting in time, because there are some of our members have another meeting directly after this one. Thank you. Colleagues, 5 minutes. It is now 10 to 11. Just a breather for 5 minutes, and then we would get back at 5 to 11, and during that time the Treasury could get themselves ready to do their presentation. Thank you. Do not go out of the meeting, so that just take your break for 5 minutes. Thank you. Good day, colleagues. It is now 10:55, the resumption of our meeting of the Standing Committee on Local Government, Provincial Legislation. Can I just get an indication from Johan? Johan, are we curated? Can we commence with the meeting again? Hello, this is
that's correct, Chairperson. We can proceed.
Okay, thank you. We're going to have the presentation of the Provincial Treasury, their response to the audit outcomes and what role they will play in supporting particularly those underperforming municipalities. Colleagues, we have a serious time constraint, and perhaps in terms of scheduling our meetings, this type of meetings, we need to look at the time that we allocate, because certainly it doesn't look as if we allocate enough time to exhaust the reports as thoroughly as we'd like to. So please bear with me. We need to just have a re-look at this the scheduling in future. Thank you. I think Mr. Savage is not here, so I don't know, Ms. Cantana.
Good morning.
Good morning. Treasury, you may.
The sound is okay. It has improved since this morning. Given the response by or the findings by the AG, we have quite a we have an integrated team with me this morning. The Accountant General. We also have Malcolm Boyson, Alton Johannes, Christopher Mukai, Rodney Moorman, Faiz Saleh, Melissa van Niekerk, as well as Nadia Brown, given the findings emanating from the report. And like you've indicated, we deal with the response, our response plan, and I think some of the issues raised that the members raised with the first round of questions, as well as the response from the AG. This presentation will expand on our response, our support initiatives, as well as the integrated strategy that underpins that as it relates to financial governance, and how that then fits into the broader strategic focus of the province. In addition, what we have also tried to share in the presentation with the committee is just what we foresee as emerging risks, as well as then our proposal for the corrective measures dealing with these underperforming municipalities. With your permission, Chair, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Hardin.
Thank you, Ms. Cantana.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. And for the purposes of this morning, I'm just showing who you are speaking to or who's speaking with you. And then I'll close the video and we'll go on to the presentation. I've arranged with the committee coordinator that he will drive the presentation with my cue. So I'm going to ask Johan if you can please go to slide 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dean.
So I want to start off by indicating this is the audit outcomes over the last 3 years. If Ms. Sharon Adams' presentation has shown us anything, it is that audit outcomes are very volatile. But I want to leave the committee with the assurance that if you take international standards, 28 out of 30 municipalities in the Western Cape has received unqualified audits. This is not saying that we are resting, because what the clean audit says is that there is nothing to report on a financial basis, there is nothing to report on predetermined objectives, and there is absolutely nothing to report on non-compliance with laws and regulations. So When you get the clean audit status, it means that you have no findings to report. What the committee also has to realize is that an audit is designed to only bring out the issue. If a municipality does something right, then nothing will be reported. So the end result, as expected, will be we will only report on issues identified in a municipality. Having said that, if you look over the last 3 years, we started off in 2016-17 with 21 municipalities receiving clean audits. In the 2018-19 financial year, 13 of those municipalities had received clean audit. And yes, I have to mention that of the 13 in the country, 18 municipalities in the country received clean audits, 13 in the Western Cape. This doesn't happen by chance. This happens through a considered effort throughout the year. The audit is a point in time. The financial statements are submitted end of August. The auditor gives an opinion 3 months later at the end of November, and they give you a flash or a snapshot of what happens in the organization. Provincial Treasury and the Department of Local Government actually works with the municipality on a daily basis. So if it comes to the in-depth findings and issues relating to a municipality, the Department of Treasury as well as local government are able to give you that kind of in-depth knowledge. It's also important to note that, yes, they recognize that the issue that has been brought to the fore is the issue of irregular expenditure. Now, I'm going to make a statement that is in line with the current standards. The fact that the AG has brought out irregular expenditure is no surprise. The fact that the irregular expenditure has happened in supply chain, it's absolutely no surprise. That is because between the budget and the financial statements, everything that happens in between is supply chain management. And yes, as it stands now, in terms of supply chain management, there are a lot of uncertainties in the practicalization of regulations, in the practicalization of current laws and regulations that has to be complied with by the municipalities. Johan, if you can move to the next slide, please. Okay. So we've identified that most of the municipalities deals with non-compliance with laws and regulations. The AG has correctly indicated that it is as a result of procurement and contract management issues. Then, and let me give you an example. The AG mentioned something about the housing delivery in the province. Now, the issue with housing is that there are very few organizations or service providers that actually meet all the requirements that is required in terms of the construction development, the Construction Industry Development Board, in terms of all the grading that's required. So there are multiple requirements and not many service providers actually meet those requirements. So as it relates to the delivery of housing, there's definitely space for policy decision and there's space for cleaning up the regulations so that the irregular expenditure doesn't come out as it is currently presented. Let me also say, I can emphatically say that the irregular expenditure that you see in front of you, it does not represent fraud and corruption. If it was fraud and corruption, the Auditor General would have had to have a duty to report in the audit reports that actual fraud and corruption has occurred in a municipality. So I will again repeat, there is no fraud and corruption on the irregular expenditure that has been disclosed in the financial statements. Irregular expenditure can sometimes mean that an administrative process hasn't happened. And because of that administrative process, it could be that the municipality has still received value. It's just perhaps at a particular level in the administration, either a signature hasn't been met or an advertisement for 20 days instead of 21 days hasn't occurred. So I am inviting the committee to have a further session later on in the year to actually take the committee through to what exactly irregular expenditure means. In terms of the debt collection periods exceeding 30 days have deteriorated. Well, as it relates to debt management, once a debt has been raised against a recipient of the services of municipality, that debt is never prescribed. if a debt has been written up in, let's say, 1990, in the year 2000, in the year 2010, that debt never prescribes. So the debt book will continually raise. The issue that we do have in a municipality is council makes the decision for a debt write-off policy. Now, this is a very sensitive thing because council doesn't necessarily want to write off debt, whilst the municipality needs to show a true reflection of what debtors there are. So the debt collection policy, we've checked the municipalities. Each and every municipality has an appropriate debt collection policy. The fact that they cannot write off debt, that is the sensitive matter which the council has to deal with. So we don't have any concerns with the number that's been presented, and we do realize that the debt will continuously grow. This is not just evident in the municipalities, this is reflective of the entire country. So, and now with COVID happening, COVID-19 happening, we are going to see a multifold increase in the debt. So this is something that's constantly on a monthly basis that the Provincial Treasury follows up through the interim, the IYMs, the in-year monitoring, and we do raise this with municipality to expend every single effort to collect that debt. In terms of the effective use of consultants, I can invite again the committee. There is a MFMA circular, it's Circular 97. The MFMA circular does not outlaw the use of consultants, and we will never condone the use of consultants where somebody has been employed. The consultants, we are comforted that the consultants are used for specific projects. They come in, they deliver a service, and then they move off. It is almost expected that most institutions will make use of consultants because it's not cost effective to sometimes appoint somebody on a full-time basis to do a short-term project. So again, I'm going to invite the committee to please look at the MFMA Circular 97 specifically that deals with consultants. As it relates to predetermined objectives, there is incorrect reporting of the performance information. And yes, the Provincial Treasury has not just provided training and capacitation through our contract with a service provider, but we do have a forum where the municipalities are able to raise their issues and concerns. The problem with the way that the performance information is sometimes reported is whether information is useful and reliable sometimes become a subjective debate. And that is something that when the municipality prepares the IDP, the Integrated Development Report, as well as a plan, as well as the SDBIPs, the municipalities make sure that the performance information is in line with the plans that has been made public. Johan, if you can move to the next slide, please. Now, what we've done is we've categorized what are the key issues in terms of the issues around supply chain management. The next slide, please. Okay, when you look at supply chain, sorry, I'm on slide 5. I do apologize to the committee members. You're on slide 5, please. So here is a synopsis of the issues that still stings when it comes to audit outcomes. We're talking about Regulation 32. Regulation 32 is about piggybacking, and very, very quickly, piggybacking is utilizing the process of one municipality. They've done all of the administrative work around the procurement process, and another municipality identifies the same need, so they will utilize the process of a sister municipality and contract. Currently, just in the past year, but National Treasury is Circular 96, FMA Circular 96, where National Treasury put down what was the intention behind Regulation 32. And again, I'm going to invite the committee to, once you have studied the Circular 96, invite Treasury to take you through the complications of applying Regulation 32. What the committee can be comforted with is that service delivery has occurred. There are perhaps issues around the competition, around how the contracts has been set up, but it's not a simple yes or no answer. It's a very gray area, and National Treasury has recognized that this is a gray area, and I think for the year to come, there will be much more written about Regulation 32. The next issue is about bid committees, and it is important for the committee to understand that for an expense to be irregular, if the regulation says that 5 individuals must sit on that bid committee, but unfortunately now only 4 members had sat on that bid committee, then that entire transaction will be classified as irregular because a particular law or regulation hasn't been followed. This is the intricacies of when something is irregular or when it is not irregular. In terms of declaration of interest, the Auditor General is the Auditor General of the entire country. They have access to the information from every department, every public entity, and every municipality. In the Western Cape, we have the information of all our municipalities in the Western Cape, as well as the departments and the public entities. When a municipality now goes and does a procurement transaction and they require the service provider to, or the official to declare the interest, the municipality can only run the test against their own systems and against Western Cape government systems. Sometimes when the Auditor General does that same test, they run it against the entire country's database. This has been an issue for the last number of years. The entire government gets a single database to check all of the information of officials. We will always and consistently have this issue of declaration of interest. What is critical is that the people that sit in the adjudication of that bid, it is critical that they declare that they do not have any interest in the contract so that there isn't any untoward behavior. But until there is a single system, we are expecting that there will be an issue around the declarations of interest. Much have been said currently under local content, and I'm going to leave it to my supply chain officials to handle any questions as it relates to local content, because it's also a very complicated and intricate subject matter, and it's actually a specialist area. As it relates to deviations, you will be aware that the Auditor General has indicated there is a regulation. Regulation 36 allows for deviation, but sometimes the auditors, they raise an issue with management and actually question the decision by management. What Provincial Treasury and the Department of Local Government is clear about is, as long as management has fully documented their decision, they've made the necessary disclosure, the regulations, the law actually requires or allows there to be deviations. It is then for council to interrogate the management of that municipality to fully explain the deviation. I spoke about regulation related to the bid committees. So as you can see, committee, that in terms of the issues that's coming out of the audit, the Provincial Treasury has done a detailed analysis. Much of these analysis can, and I must state this, is not something that can be resolved at the provincial level. It is something that must be resolved at the national level because it impacts regulations that has been issued at a national level, not at the provincial level. If we can move to slide 6. And this is where I start speaking about the actual interventions that the Provincial Treasury has already made. So we've met with National Treasury. We've given them a position paper of all the laws and regulations that we believe they need to consider in fixing for the next, fixing the policy decisions, for fixing the laws and regulations. Until that is fixed, we will continue to see issues coming out of the supply chain audit. What we've done is, and this is a question raised by an earlier member, every single COMAF comes to Provincial Treasury on request from Provincial Treasury of the municipalities. When we receive those COMAFs, we check it to make sure that the actual finding is raised. When the finding that is raised is accurate, that the municipality has responded comprehensively, and then we'll give a second opinion on that same response to make sure that there is a true and fair reflection of what the response is to the Auditor General. In terms of our position paper, we've made a number of proposals to National Treasury, and I spoke about it before. You will see that the National Treasury has now changed the requirements in terms of bid specific or bid adjudication committees. So slowly we are making inroads into winning the battle in terms of cleaning up the rules and regulations as it relates to supply chain. Also, what we do have in here, because this is a comprehensive response, we meet with the Auditor General and we try to reach consensus on how to look at things when it comes to auditing. If anything that the committee can take away is that the supply chain specialists sits within Provincial Treasury. The Provincial Treasury and the National Treasury colleagues, they write the laws and regulations, and that is why it is important for us to meet with the Auditor General to discuss with them when they look at supply chain matters, how to look at those supply chain matters. So we do have engagements. Sometimes what happens, and another committee member raised the issue around COMAFs. Sometimes what happens, at the eve of signing off on the management report and the audit report, a municipality might be overwhelmed with comments and there isn't enough time to respond to those comments. Then what happens is, to ensure that the audit gets signed off on time, the municipality accepts the comment and resolves to fix it in the next year. It is from the time, the 30th of November, until the next audit that the Provincial Treasury goes into depth with workshops across all platforms and with National Treasury to ensure that most of the findings in the Western Cape is either first-time findings or it is findings that impacts every single municipality in the country. So it is just about letting the committee know that there is a very, very robust process when it comes to dealing with issues of audit findings. Slide 7, please, sir. When moving over to slide 7, we can already see that in terms of our engagements that we have municipality, we combine the assurance functions where our supply chain officials together with our internal auditors at municipalities come together and look at how can we improve the situation. Sometimes we will tell the municipalities that, or we will tell the internal auditors at the municipalities to specifically look at certain type of transactions so that it can be a preventative measure. And they've done that in the past and they continue to do it. In fact, in the Western Cape, we have a district combined assurance workshop where when we receive all the management reports, we combine all of the findings, and for this year, the number of findings exceeded 1,000. What we do is we break it up into the category of findings. Is it asset management issues? Is it internal audit issues? Is it audit committee issues? Then we take all of those subsets and we give it to the appropriate experts to deal with it in their forums. Moving on to the next slide. We also have relevant engagements with the IGR structures. So in terms of the OCPO, we do meet with National Treasury, the Office of the Chief Procurement Office, and we ask National Treasury to meet with the AG to review and to provide guidance on specifically on SCM Regulation 32, because I think this is going to be a continuing thorn in the side of the municipalities. If the municipalities does not continue to do piggybacking in the next foreseeable few months, we may have an issue with the delivering of houses, because this has been an acceptable practice for however long, and until the municipality is able to get a different model for delivering houses, piggybacking will be staying for some time, and that is why National Treasury saw it fit to issue a circular in terms of how to deal with piggybacking. Then we've also had interventions with the Department of Trade and Industry, because they are the authority when it comes to issuing regulations around local content. And sometimes, just to give you a practical explanation, sometimes a contract could say, let's say, be about 10 million rand. But of that 10 million rand contract, 50,000 of what is in the total contract must be local content. If the municipality does not have the local content portion, the 50,000 out of the 10 million, the entire contract will be considered to be irregular. Now, it's not always practical when it goes to local content, because it comes with its own practicalities. And again, I'm going to invite the committee to invite the Provincial Treasury to come and explain to you the intricacies of local content so that you can have a fuller understanding, which will allow you to appreciate the issues as it relates to irregular expenditure. We have, however, told the municipalities as red flag, please avoid using Regulation 32 until any and every interpretation challenge has been clarified. So the municipalities for the 1920 financial year would have limited the use of Regulation 32, but we will see a stall or a stall in the delivery of houses. And again, that is something that we maybe need to consider for a later discussion with the committee. If we move on to slide 9, and here I want to pause because this is the biggest thing for the Western Cape. Slide 9 speaks to the prevention of unauthorized, irregular, and fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Now, you will recall that the Auditor General has mentioned that unauthorized expenditure in the Western Cape is mostly as a result of non-cash items. Essentially, what it means is a municipality will make an estimate of an amount. Sometimes that estimate is their best estimate. The Auditor General, in hindsight, will have information that is more accurate. Now, hindsight is a perfect science. So what happens is the municipality at the time of making the decision, they would have said, as an example, depreciation is 10 Rand. Then the Auditor General comes with hindsight and say, no, your depreciation should have been maybe 15 Rand. That 5 Rand differential puts the municipality into an unauthorized expenditure state. If the municipality had sufficient time to take the matter to council, that unauthorized expenditure would have been cleared by council so that they wouldn't have unauthorized expenditure. But that's just the way that the budget process works. And if there was sufficient time before finalizing financial statements, I don't think that there would be a single municipality that sits with unauthorized expenditure because of estimation. As it relates to irregular expenditure, again, I'm going to say it again, the irregular expenditure in the Western Cape, had it been that the source of the irregular expenditure is as a result of fraud and corruption, you would have seen in the audit reports fraud and corruption being reported. Not so the case in the Western Cape. There is a very robust process as it relates to irregular expenditure. National Treasury has also issued Circular 68, MFMA Circular 68 to deal with irregular expenditure. And essentially, every irregular expense will be tabled to council. Once it's tabled to council, the committee and the audit committee, the impact committee is welcome to invite Provincial Treasury and the Auditor General when the matter of irregular expenditure is discussed. And just personally, in the last couple of months, I had sat in 2 council meetings where, after the explanation was given to council about what has caused the irregularity, council was fully aligned with why no disciplinary processes had to be taken against any individual, because, as I say, sometimes it is just an administrative glitch because the policy and the rules and the regulations isn't always necessarily aligned. So in the Western Cape, yes, there is consequence management and it's being followed up by the impacts. And I can assure you, most of our municipalities do have the municipal public account committees that is established, which operates much the same like a scoper for the provincial government. In terms of the issues that currently we will be looking at still is the disclosure in the annual financial statements. And just to give you an appreciation, to set up a set of financial statements, National Treasury in just about a week ago issued a document. The document is 222 pages long, which tells the municipality, if you want to have a fully complete set of financial statements that accurately discloses all of the issues that the standards require, here is a checklist of 222 pages long. No wonder our municipalities will use consultants to verify that once the municipality has prepared the set of financial statements, they want a clean set of eyes looking at the financial statements to minimize the number of material misstatements in financial statements. That just gives you an appreciation for the extent of the work that goes behind putting together a set of financial statements. I'm going to move a bit faster. In terms of the submission of financial statements, Johan, could we please go to slide 10? To give the committee the comfort that essentially when we look at the PT support initiatives, we have accounting working committees on a quarterly basis where any technical matters can be raised to the Provincial Treasury. We take that matters up to the professional bodies like SAICA, like the Accounting Standards Board, who is the authority on the accounting standards. And then what we also have is during the time of audit, every single municipality knows that if there is a contentious and a transversal matter that will impact their audit outcome, they can level it to Provincial Treasury. We will immediately put our resources and our investment behind it. And if it is something that only National Treasury can resolve, we will even, in the time before COVID, we would get on the plane to have the eyeball-to-eyeball discussions with National Treasury. And in many times, many of those issues had been cleared out before the audits were signed off. We then also, as it pertains to the management reports, and one question that was raised earlier, how soon can we get the findings to the municipalities? Let me say, the moment the municipalities finalize their financial statements or their audit reports, it's the 30th of November. Provincial Treasury team throughout December and January sits and plows through that management reports. By the end of March, every municipality has a detailed, what we call a governance action plan. That governance action plan addresses all of the management findings that was raised, and it gets monitored on a quarterly basis to make sure that what the municipality indicated they will address, they actually do address in the quarterly reports that they issue. Moving on to the next slide. If we can go to slide 13, please. So again, giving the committee the comfort that in the Western Cape government is following an integrated management approach. We start off the year where our provincial top management, together with our municipal managers, they have a focused planning session. We then have what we call district consultative forums, where they take what was issued in the PTM and MM session. They have a further discussion and sessions to do with planning and governance. Thereafter, normally around February, we have detailed technical engagements. It is called the time engagements, or some of the committee members may recall it as the MGRO engagements. And then lastly, we have the SIME engagements. We have the strategic integrated management engagements. So this is a slide that represents the work that is not just done by PT, but is done by the Department of Local Government together with the municipalities, because we recognize that there has to be a partnership. The municipality, it acts independently, but they recognize that they need the partnership from the Provincial Treasury as well as the Department of Local Government. Having said that we are partners, it doesn't stop us from ensuring and enforcing the laws and regulations. So there is a time where we get firm, but there's also a time where we collaborate on the solutions. Moving on to the next slide. In our engagements with the municipality, we do look at the effective resource mobilization and sound fiscal management. The principles that we cover is the effective and the efficient use of resources. We have effective financial oversight happening on a monthly basis, where municipalities are giving us their interim, their IYMs, in-year monitoring schedules, so that we can manage the ratios that come through to us. And then a large part of the work that we also do is we enforce building capacity, because if our officials in the municipalities are fully capacitated, it makes our oversight responsibilities a bit easier, and we can actually concentrate on the analysis and seeing where municipality is able to, where they are going to stay on track or where they're going to go off the rails. The approach that's adopted by the Western Cape government ensures that the municipality is able to be resilient, that they are agile, and that they can implement innovation as it comes across. In terms of the next slide, please. The next slide is really just a pictogram of the areas that we cover. And I want to move on to slide 16. Slide 16 will tell you Specifically, the focus areas that Provincial Treasury looks at is when we have the MTech engagements, the committee may know that we issue a report. It is the MERO, the Municipal Economic Review and Outlook. And here we look at the fiscal consolidation and efficiency gains in terms of what is per region, what are the businesses that flourishes in those region, what are the areas of concentration that the municipality might need to apply, how do they look at local economic development. So the municipalities uses that publication in terms of the projects that they want to take on board. We give them in terms of our own intelligence when it comes to our MTech, we share with them our economic intelligence so that when they do put the budget on the table, ultimately they put the budget on the table that is credible and that is reliable and sustainable. Then what we also do is we define specifically procurement strategies to drive the efficiencies and specifically looking at enabling what the local economic development teams need to look at. We concentrate on innovation and especially in the internal control environment. To give you an idea, in this COVID environment, before COVID, we used to have chief risk officer and chief audit executive sessions on a quarterly or on a biannual basis. To accommodate for COVID, what we've done is we've gone virtual and we meet with the CROs and the CAEs on a monthly basis to make sure that we put sufficient preventative controls in place. We also currently in Provincial Treasury, we are strengthening our use of data and our analytical abilities so that we're not just looking at surface data, but we can actually drill down deep into the data of a municipality so that where we see a municipality further down the line is going to have issues, we can engage and we can intercept as soon as possible. Moving on to slide 18. What we've done move slide 18, please. What we've done for the committee is we've already indicated to the committee exactly what we see the emerging risks for local government to be. So what this gives you is an appreciation where the Western Cape government has already recognized what are the areas that the municipalities are struggling with and how that may impact on a future audit or on preventative and detective controls that they may have to implement. So I'm not going to speak much about the slide. Perhaps when the questions come, then you may have more questions on the slide. Moving over to the next slide, slide 19.
Mr. Hardin, we have 5 more minutes left. We still have another presentation. If we could.
Yes, I'm almost done. I'm almost done, Chair. Okay.
Yeah.
On slide 19, to further give the committee comfort, slide 19 demonstrates that currently some of the governance challenges that the municipalities are facing is that there is conflict between effective political oversight as opposed to political interference. There are accountability failures with the political and administrative leadership. There is increasing tension between the cost of compliance versus service delivery. Do I deliver my service at the expense of compliance, or do I comply to the extent where there is almost zero service delivery? And the Auditor General rightfully said that a clean audit doesn't mean that service delivery happens on the ground. So it's not a case of that maak nie saak nie attitude. It's a case of we have to see what is going to impact the ratepayer the most, and if it's service delivery, every municipality want to put service delivery on the forefront. Then the other governance challenges is the implementation challenges of the legislative framework, as well as the ineffective utilization of assurance providers. There are some internal control deficiencies which we pick up under our Chief Risk Officer and our Chief Audit Executive forums. And then what we're also doing, we're strengthening the controls behind the consequence management so that if there is an errant municipality, we will raise this as a part of our, not our enabling, but our enforcing responsibility in terms of the MFMA. And then lastly, perhaps what I must say is that our municipalities, especially the rural municipalities, they have issues with attracting and retaining qualified and competent people. Sometimes what happens is because they are a municipality that is by a big qualified audit member, and the cost to appoint such a member might be too expensive. So what we do is we try and train our audit committee individuals so that they across the board there is consistency in at least in the training that we provide. Second to last slide, slide 21, please, or sorry, the next slide. This is just an indication to the committee in terms of slide 20. You will see in an environment where we're dealing with things that we've never dealt with before. When it comes to, we look at the ratio specifically, and the following 6 to 8 municipalities has already raised issues. You will see West LA in there, which are the 2 municipalities that received quality in the prior year. There are 6 other municipalities. Some of them have come out as clean in the audit round. But when we look at the cost coverage, the current ratio, as well as the liquidity ratios, these municipalities are having significant constraints. If we move over to the next slide, slide 21, and I'm rounding up, Chair.
Okay.
Slide 21. Again, there is detailed diagnostics that has been made on these municipalities. I guess in conclusion, what I want to say to the committee is, where you have concerns around any particular thing, it's incumbent on you to request local government. We have the intelligence. The audit report is. Yes, sir.
You're breaking up, Mr. Harding. You're breaking up. I can't hear you so clearly. Can you just wrap up, please?
I am wrapping up, sir.
Okay. Please proceed.
Our very last slide, slide 23, our very last slide. What we are concentrating on in the very short term is we will continue to improve our engagement and our communication between all spheres of government. But if you can move to slide 23, please. We are looking at streamlining our processes as far as possible. We are looking for any areas where there's duplication within the laws and regulations, and we are implementing a coordinated approach regarding policy and planning for citizens. And then very lastly, we will continue to strengthen and maintain the governance and the oversight and accountability as it relates to municipalities. Chair, that is the end of the presentation. If there's any slide or any detail that you require further, you are welcome to raise those questions to Treasury or local government. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. Colleagues, I see some of you have raised your hands quickly. Thank you. Let me just put it this way. Some of us may lose connection due to load shedding, and we need to interrogate these reports more exhaustively and more thoroughly. I have to humbly ask the department if we cannot let their report stand over, or their presentation stand over to a follow-up meeting that I am scheduling to discuss this matter further, because I think that we have not really sort of dealt thoroughly enough with the content of the outcomes of the AG's report. We have the presentation of Treasury, we have the department's presentation, we're waiting further reports from the AG's office, and then we will have sort of a substantial body of information at our disposal to have a meaningful, thorough engagement in the report. So I know the department has prepared for this particular meeting, and I humbly apologize if I should ask them to stand over, but I would like your indulgence in that matter. But I'll just give members quickly an opportunity to respond quickly. I see in order of the members who have raised their hands: Honourable Maseko, Honourable Mitchell, Honourable van der Westhuizen, and Honourable Moran. In that order, please. Honourable Maseko, quickly.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't have a lot of questions, and I appreciate that we will, if the Department of Local Government will allow us to meet so that we can go in depth with their presentation and based on the AG's presentation also. The only thing that I want to find out from the Treasury is, one thing the AG indicated, I think from National when we went, was the usage of the consultants in different municipalities, because the concern was the rapid work that you have, the CFO that you are paying and consultant which is dealing with the financials, that there need to be a decision of whether the municipalities are using the CFO or they are going to use the consultants for their financials. What is his take on that? And the other one is, you know, I hear I don't know, maybe he will answer me. I hear the blanket statement of the official saying that the outcomes of the AG doesn't mean there is a corruption, or there doesn't mean that it has to do with a fraud. And I tend to believe that is a blanket statement when we have information also that says there's been a double payment for a housing project. So what that is not about the signature or the one paper that is missing. It's a double amount of the money paid to a supplier that it shouldn't have happened. And now when you hear Treasury saying the blanket statement of saying that no, it might be this the signature, it's not fraud or corruption, it's sort of raising the question of where are we getting it wrong if that is the case. And we do understand, I think, from the standing committee that the AG does the sample testing when he does the audit report. It doesn't mean it goes to everything that is in the books of the municipality. He just chooses some few things, the performance indicators, and test if the procedures are followed or the regulations are followed. That is why I'm concerned with the blanket statement of noise about the signature or maybe a paper missing there and there. That are we hearing that correctly, or maybe I'm misinterpreting what the explanation from the official was saying? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Maseko. Can I just raise that we requested the AG's office to provide us with a detailed report on the irregular and wasteful expenditure per municipality, and that's a matter that we need to sort of thoroughly interrogate at our next meeting. And I don't want us to try to solicit sort of responses with regard to that now, because we may not do justice to it. Because I do have an issue also if we raise that depreciation is estimated to be 10% and it turned out to be 15%, and therefore that would constitute an irregular expenditure, which is possibly not. We want specific instances where these matters have occurred, like you've raised, Honourable Maseko, in terms of the double payment, and that will get from the report from the AG's office. But I think also I take issue with the condescending manner in which we are being addressed, in terms of we will educate you on regulation, this will educate you on local content. We know what the requirements for local content is, and if non-adherence thereto would result in irregular expenditure, which may, may not be so. But nonetheless, let's hear Honourable Mitchell, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I don't have a lot of questions. I just want to, there was a reference made, I don't know on what slide number it was, but as to the action plans per municipality that gets introduced by Provincial Treasury on a, I think, quarterly basis, that they go into to address the management requirements or that was highlighted in the management report from the AG. Chair, is it possible that, and I'm now being biased because I am the constituency head for the Central Karoo, is it possible that we could get that action plan for the municipalities of Beaufort and Laingsburg as highlighted in the presentation, and also just to link that to what we have been briefed on by the AG? If that's possible. And then, Chair, with regards to the internal audit committees of municipalities and provincial treasuries link between those two committees, how often does provincial treasury meet or engage internal audit committees? And then also, if a recommendation from the internal audit committee is not being tabled by a municipality in council as the requirements, what role does Provincial Treasury have to ensure that those recommendations are in fact implemented? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Mitchell. Honourable van der Westhuizen.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, through you to Mr. Hardin of the department. Mr. Hardin, you mentioned one of the examples which lead to irregular expenditure is when, for example, and I'm quoting your example, when 5 members for a bid committee need to be present and only 4 pitch. Now, surely this kind of example that you've just mentioned, if everybody knows that, the easiest thing is to say, sorry, we need to postpone this meeting. We cannot continue because we are not adhering or conforming with the prescripts. So is it really, as you've said to us, that kind of transgressions or that kind of deviations that people still continue with? Surely, you know, I accept that there are some technical and difficult circumstances which sometimes have got grey areas which lead to interpretation. But there are surely, in terms of the example that you have quoted, there could be no doubt as to what is right and what is wrong. So do you stick with your example? Do you want to inform us as a committee today that at some municipalities people still make such basic mistakes? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. Honourable Moran.
Chair, thanks, Chair. Chair, I agree with both previous speakers, the Honourable Maseko and the Honourable van der Westhuizen. Maseko said that it's a blank statement to say that there is no fraud and corruption. Now, Chair, I would like to understand, Chair, if there's no fraud and corruption in these things. If, for instance, regulations is saying 3 written quotations and you haven't done so, what is the intention, Chair? The intention is to benefit someone.
Yeah.
If there's supposed to be a competitive bidding process and that has been not, and the percentages is there. 3 written quotations, 24%. They haven't complied. Competitive bidding process, 41%. Declaration of interest, you don't declare, Chair, and then it seems that the measures to do balances in checks is not there within municipalities, Chair. The overpriced of goods and services, payments for goods and services not received, Chair. You make a payment to someone who have not delivered. He gave you nothing, Chair. So when we are saying, Chair, that communities have received value for money, yes, true, but it might be through a fraudulent process, Chair. You received the money for value, but through a fraudulent process, Chair. Chair, that's the one. Then, Chair, clean audits, and I've heard Mr. Dean spoke about the international standards and 20 out of 30. It is very good. But if you look on slide, I think it's slide 20, Chair, of the presentation, and it speaks about the municipalities running into financial troubles. I think it's 8 of them, Chair, liquidity risks. You will find that it's 8 municipalities. You will find that 4 out of those 8 have received clean audits. They've received clean audits, but they are in a financial mess. Chair, how do you balance this two? How did it happen, Chair? Yes, you have received a clean audit, but soon along the line, you will not be able to pay or you meet your commitments. It doesn't make sense, Chair. Yeah, so let me stop there, Chair. We got a lot of other questions, but I think also some of the questions can be forwarded.
Okay, fine. Honourable Smith, I recognize you, Honourable Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I have 2 quick questions, man. What happens if one has evidence in a municipality that the supply chain manager was part of awarding a tender that happens to go to the partner of the supply chain manager, and the supply chain manager also declared this, but still she was part of the awarding committee of the tender? That's the one. And the second one is exactly what my colleague just spoke about, is delivering goods and services, or was paid for goods and services, and the goods and services was never delivered. There's clear evidence about these 2 examples that I've made. What happens? Can we report this? Because interestingly enough, I think it has happened under the year under review, and yet these municipalities got clean audits. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Smith. Colleagues, thank you for your questions. And I think that you have many more, but at our follow-up engagement, we will be able to address those outstanding questions you may have. Mr. Hardin, do you want to respond to some of the questions, please?
Yes, Chair, I'll take the opportunity. The first question was about usage of consultants. Chair, am I coming through clearly?
Yes, yes, you do.
Okay. On the usage of consultants, let me give you a picture. The expense on consultants in the province was 40 million rand. The expense on audit fees was 120 million rand upward. Consultants is used for the entire year. The auditors comes in for 3 months. We do not believe that any municipality that appoints the consultants through the appropriate process and for the right reasons is an errant municipality. As I explained, just in setting up the financial statements, there is some 220 pages of compliance that needs to be complied with, and that is why we do not have a problem if a municipality utilizes the skills or the work of an expert to make sure that the financial statements is completely free of material misstatements. So as it relates to consultants, we've got in-depth analysis of the consultants used by the municipality. As it relates to my statement that what has been reported in the audit report under irregular expenditure cannot be fraud and corruption. This is not me who says this. This is an international standard that guides the auditors. There's an international standard that tells the auditor, your processes must be designed to pick up fraud and corruption. That is why every single audit report, we have the assurance by the auditors that the procedures they have followed was designed to pick up all of the fraud and corruption on material transactions. If they had identified fraud and corruption, it would naturally have ended up in the audit report. That is the reason behind my statement that whatever is reported in the audit report, if it's not specifically stated that there is fraud and corruption, we have the assurance from the auditors that there is at least no fraud and corruption on material transactions. Then, as it relates to the Central Karoo Action Plan, I'm going to ask the committee member to write to the procedural officer, and we will seek permission from the municipality to make available municipal specific reports. The audit report is a public document, but the management report is not a public document, and we must go through council to get the permission to provide the committee with such a report. As it relates to the Chief Risk Officer and the Chief Audit Executive, I think in the presentation I mentioned that we met with them on a quarterly basis, but because of COVID-19 and because of the way that we have to operate now, we've gone virtual and we've actually meet with them on a monthly basis now. What we do ensure as a provincial treasury is that whatever reports they come up with, that they table it in the correct forums. And we do have somebody in PT that can provide you with additional detail where so required. As it pertains to the question on the blanket statement of fraud and corruption, I stick with the statement of if there was fraud and corruption, the Auditor General was compelled by law to report that in their audit reports. As it relates to slide 20, Member Moran mentioned the issue around slide 20, and 8 of the 30 municipalities have liquidity risks. Much of this, the last few slides that we have put to the committee, is information and is circumstances as a result of COVID-19. If COVID-19 didn't happen, those municipalities wouldn't be in the situation where there are liquidity risks. In many of these municipalities, they are what we term rural municipalities, and where many jobs have been lost. I think the first port of call would be not to pay your services that you get from municipalities. So the deterioration has specifically happened from the first or from the month of March. And all we're doing is we're highlighting to the committee the risks that municipalities are facing and how the provincial government has to respond to those risks in terms of the information and the support that we give to those municipalities. Then as it relates to the specific relations in relation to SCM management, I'm going to allow my colleague Nadia Ibrahim, if Chair will allow her, to give you specific responses as it relates to the local content or as it relates to where a municipality, where there's evidence that the municipality has flouted the laws and regulations. Surely and certainly the Western Cape has a zero tolerance for fraud and corruption, and there are avenues and channels where it can be reported. So Chair, with that, if you require a more detailed response, we are happy to take written questions from the committee, and then we'll respond in that way. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Sardine. Appreciate your response. Members, I don't know if there's anything else you want to raise, and I think that we are far from finished with this sort of engagement. I think there's lots to be responded to, and lots of questions that need to be asked of the various departments that's responsible for making sure that we exercise effective oversight. Just one concern that I have that was raised by Ms. Sardine in terms of, and we need to get some further sort of responses to it, is that if we request a management report from a particular municipality or of municipalities, and we have to go via council, and where there are perhaps allegations of wrongdoing, we may not get that management report. Where do we place this committee in terms of our oversight role? But it's a discussion for another time, and we need to make sure that we are equipped to exercise our role as oversight body effectively. And I think once we receive those additional information, colleagues, we will be able to interrogate these questions more meaningfully.
Chair.
Yeah,
Chair, Member Smith.
Member Smith, quickly.
Chair, just 10 seconds. No, I
Yes.
wanted to echo your statement on the management report, Chair, because the management report is a result of an audit process. So it cannot be a confidential document belonging to council, because the audit process is a public process. Suppose the end of that process is a public document. So I want to echo that, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Honourable Van der Westhuizen. Honourable Mitchell. Honourable Mitchell.
It was incorrectly raised. Sorry, Chair.
Honourable Moran. Okay. Honourable Moran, you wanted to ask a question?
Yeah, Chair, I just wanted to check with Mr. Dean. When he responded to the issue of consultations, he then said that consultation fees for the whole year used by municipalities is 40 million rand. And then the AG's bill is 120. The AG's bill, is it only for the, is it 120 for the Western Cape, 120 million?
I would assume yes, so, sir. But certainly Mr. Harding can speak for himself. Okay, it looks like it's for, and I think I need to see it in the context.
I need the answer.
Mr. Harding, the AG's bill, it is for the entire provincial departments and not only for municipalities.
No, Chair. The bill for the municipalities is 120 at least, and then above that is another 100 million for the provincial departments and public entities.
That's a lot.
So what I'm trying to do is correlate the use of consultants that works for an entire year, perhaps on a specific project, versus when the auditors comes in for 2 or 3 months.
For sure. Thank you, Mr. Arjun.
Thanks.
Create the context. Colleagues, we have reached the end of our meeting now. It is now 12 o'clock. I am deeply sorry that we didn't have the presentation of the department, but as I've indicated, we have extraordinary time challenges in terms of when we can meet again, and the earliest available date we have for a follow-up meeting is only on the 18th of August. So I will liaise with the procedural officer and with the departments that we reconvene this meeting, or have where we have this follow-up engagement with the department and Treasury in terms of the audit outcomes, and by then, colleagues, we would have received additional information from the AG's office that will give us a greater insight in terms of the irregular and unauthorized expenditure in the various municipalities. And on that note, I'd like to thank the Treasury and its officials for preparing this presentation and being present in this meeting, as well as the department, and accept my humblest apologies that you were not in a position to present a report today, but we have received it. We will study it thoroughly, and when we meet again, which would be depending on availability of yourselves, on the 18th of August, we'll have a thorough engagement with the outcomes of this AG's report. On that note, colleagues, I would excuse the department and they may leave the meeting, and we just have a few administrative matters that we need to deal with as a committee, and then we can close the meeting. Thank you, and we'll see each other again. Johan, are you still with us, or are you?
Thank you, Chair.
Johan, are you still here? Johan? I think, colleagues, I think Johan has Johannes is here.
Sorry, Chair, I think you have to be specific. There's Johan Vermeulen and another Johan Gutierrez. So
Johan
which
could
one?
say Precision Officer. I know that he's having load shedding at 12. So he may just disappear. Colleagues, my apology, with this kind of meeting that one needs to schedule much longer stretches of time. We have another meeting. Honorable van der Westhuizen and then Honorable Maseko and Honorable Maran is attending that meeting. So we are not in a position to continue with this meeting. And you will appreciate the fact that there's so much more that you want to ask and answers you want to get. And hopefully we'll get all of those answers when we get those additional reports from the AG's office. And I think that there are some sort of contradictions in terms of the response of what Treasury was saying and what the AG's office was saying, and we need to sort of engage with those contradictions. So we have the other adoption of minutes we still need to adopt. Are you available to be around for another 10 minutes just to adopt the minutes?
Chair, yes.
Okay. So
Chair, can we start with resolutions quickly, just the most urgent ones?
Right, fine. Let's just start with resolutions quickly. Johan, are you here? No, he's not here. So,
Johan
okay,
Vermeulen will take over.
We'll capture the resolutions here. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, let's just start. Any Honorable Maseko?
Okay, Chair, the first one, it will be that management report. You have to find out how do we access that. We will love to see it. And also from the AG, the details that he volunteered, that he can send the details of the municipalities on the reports, if we can get that. And the third resolution, it will be the engagement again. I will request that we need an engagement again with the AG and the Treasury, because we can't have a report that is contradicting itself. We need to get a common ground of how do we listen to the two departments in giving us the information. And another thing that is important is that when we had the session with Makwetu, he was concerned about the issue of the consultants and the CFOs. And now the Treasury have brought in something else of the issue of the AG, that there's a lot of money. The insinuation when I'm listening is that, in fact, we are paying less for consultants. So we need them, and more money is going to AG. So the insinuation is that AG is receiving a lot, so mustn't say anything about consultants. We need to have the common ground of really getting info from the Treasury, giving us the information, and also having the same information from the AG, because our understanding is that engagement is happening throughout the year. It can't be when we get the report now, there's a difference like that. It doesn't make sense to me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Maseko. Honorable Maran?
Chair, yeah, I agree. I fully agree with Honorable Maseko. You must keep your mouth quiet about the 40 million rand, because AG have received 120 million, and therefore you cannot speak about it. I fully agree with that. Chair, you also raised the issue of, I think that should be part of the resolutions, the irregular expenditure in the list of municipalities. Maybe that should be called for us, so that we can then interrogate them. Chair, I think Johan should know how to.
But Honorable Maran, shouldn't we get those municipalities after we've received that information, and then we can have a special session with identified municipalities based on the outcome of the reports?
I fully agree with you, Chair. I'm just saying it must be a resolution that after we have received the report, that we should call those municipalities.
Good. Thank you. Honourable Smith? Okay, sorry. Honourable Mitchell?
Please note
thank
me,
you,
Chair.
I've been covered by Honourable Moran for the resolution. I want to take it further to say that can we start in alphabetical order when we call those municipalities?
Sure, we'll do that. Wouldn't be a problem.
Because Beaufort is at the top.
Chair, thank you. I agree with the last speaker. I think Beaufort West should come first in this interrogation. Chair, my request is actually the same as Honourable Ms. Maseko, that we need a detailed report on the municipalities who are mostly impacted in this irregular expenditure. And secondly, I would like to also be provided with the report which detailed the list of the investigations that are actually taking place in terms of what is currently happening in these municipalities. So if we can be provided with such report and in terms of how far the processes are, that will be from me.
Okay, thank you, Honourable Makamba Boycha. We have a previous resolution in the previous meeting that requests that kind of information, and we have scheduled a session where the department will come and present the progress and findings with regard to those investigations. But we can ask him again, of course.
Chair,
yeah?
Just on a point of intersect, because the Honourable Makamba Bodja was saying that Beaufort West must come first. Why? Because the biggest culprits, Chair, if you look at the report, is the City of Cape Town, is George and Oudtshoorn. Those three account for more than 1 billion rand of irregular expenditures.
Alphabetical? So let's stick to the alphabetical.
No, member, it's alphabetical Beaufort and Cape Town.
Beaufort West comes first.
Okay, thank you,
Thank
colleagues.
you, Member Makamba Bodja.
Thank you, colleagues. I like your sort of sense of humor and enthusiasm. I've been notified that Johan could see is back online, but his line is not very sort of strong. But be it as it may, I think all the other reports, and I don't want to delay the colleagues any longer because they need to go to another meeting. The minutes and all those other matters could be referred to or follow our next meeting. But the only thing that I want us to agree to is the program, committee program for the foreseeable future. Right, colleagues, you have that? You have a copy of that?
Yes, Chair.
So, Johan, are you with me?
Chairperson, I'm back. I'll see if I can get him up quickly.
Yeah, please do so.
There we go.
Okay. This program is available, visible to all of us. The next meeting is the 28th.
Yes, the 28th of July, Chair. Tuesday, yes. 28th July.
That's correct.
Then Chair, then the other dates are not there. It's all of them are on Tuesdays, but there are no dates. And I'm not sure, Chair, like in the past, if our meetings is fortnightly.
It is still fortnightly, unfortunately, because we have other committees also scheduled in between.
Then, Chair, then it means, Chair, if it's like that, then the next meeting is on the 28th. Then it means that the following meeting is supposed to be on the 11th of August.
Chair, can I make a suggestion?
Yeah, wait, yes, please.
Chair, there is we do have some constituency weeks that are cropping in and out. Can, as a standing committee, agree that if we can have a day that we agree to, and we also utilize it to slot in the urgent issue that we may feel it needs to be in, so that we have extra day to attend to to their issues.
Okay, so on the 28th, we have our engagement with the COPTA Amendment Bill, Structures Bill. The next meeting is on the 14th of August, colleagues. Then we have this follow-up meeting, because in between we have the budget, the adjustment budget that we need to approve. So in between the 28th of July and the 14th of August, we have other processes that need to unfold. So our next committee meeting would then be for the follow-up meeting. Johanna, am I correct?
Chairperson, yes. In terms of the program, our next meeting would be then on the 18th of August. And in between now and the 18th of August, we have got the Municipal Structures Amendment Bill, as well as then the adjustment appropriation and the whole budget process that goes with that. And that unfortunately takes up quite a few days, as well as constituency weeks in between. That makes it a bit difficult. But our next available date would be on the 18th of August.
So could we then substitute the 18th with the follow-up meeting with the department and the Treasury and the AG's office with regard to that additional information with regard to irregular expenditure and all those other things?
Then we do that on the 18th.
18th of August.
Okay.
Chair?
That's 3 weeks from now, Chair.
Yeah, Chair, can we agree, maybe if we can ask the members the constituency day, because I'm afraid that we are going to take the 18th, then there will be another committee after that. So if we use one day of the constituency, it can be we have more hours to interrogate these reports. And it will be your local government day that we can do that. But only if the members agree. You already have my support on that one.
Which is when, Honorable Seko, can you give me a date quickly?
Johan, when is the constituency week that is coming soon?
I think.
Chair, it appears it's from the 2nd till the 7th of August.
2nd till the 7th of August. Okay.
Yeah, then we can have a day there.
Unfortunately, I don't have the parliamentary program in front of me now, but
yeah, that's correct. Yeah. On the 4th of August, from the 4th of August till the 7th of August. Yeah, from the 4th till the 7th.
Yeah. So we can choose a day there.
Let's choose the 4th.
Yeah.
How about the 4th? Johan?
I agree with the 4th, Chair. Then we can do the follow-up of the today's agenda.
Okay. Johan, are you with me?
Chair, I'll have a look, and then if there's any problems with that, I will communicate with you, Chair.
Good.
But the principal decision is that a day in the constituency week can be utilized for a meeting.
Yes. Members, are you in agreement? Looks like thank you, but we will communicate with you. And then the other briefings, Johan, would be scheduled in our regular slots. Then the Tuesday briefing by the department, the strategic plan, that would be on the 18th of August.
Noted, Chair.
Hello, hi.
Yeah.
And then the other subsequent agenda items could be slotted into the appropriate time. We will forensic investigations at municipalities, briefing.
Sorry, Chair.
Yes.
Can we leave this to you and Johan in your capable hands? I think you have been brilliant throughout, and you can still continue to do that on our behalf, Chair.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Honourable Seko. Okay, colleagues, I may have to submit an apology for the 4th of August. Okay, good. Moving the meeting to the Monday may suit me better. Okay, Johan, I've just received a communication from Honourable van der Westhuizen that the 4th may be a challenge. So if you could utilize the Monday or the Wednesday, other than the 4th, would be in order for him. So
noted, Chair. I'll have a look and then we'll communicate to all
okay,
members. We
Thanks.
will also just have to bring this to the attention of the Chief Whip, to just so that they are aware of what we are planning.
Yes, could I ask the members of the EFF, Honourable Mkamba Boita and the ANC, are you okay that we utilize one day in the constituency period?
All in order, Chair.
ANC?
No, it's fine, Chair. But actually, the Honourable Smith should speak on this.
Honourable Smith? Honourable Smith, are you there? Okay, we will liaise.
In his absence, I got full powers. I am fully in agreement.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you so much. And I know that towards the end it was rather rushed, that we didn't get the opportunity to robustly engage with the department and the AG's office, but we will have that opportunity at our next meeting, and I'm sure by then we will be better equipped, we have additional information, and we will do what we need to do, have this robust engagement in terms of fulfilling our oversight mandate. Thank you, colleagues, for your patience and your support, and to Johan and all the other procedural officers and technical staff behind the scenes. Thank you so much for being available when it was needed. And with that, colleagues, I conclude this meeting, and may you have a wonderful day forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
I'm with you again, Chair, and Maran.